We'll call our meeting to order tonight. Renata, if you could do the roll call, please.
Gookin,
Here.
Wood,
Here.
English,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
Evans,
Here.
McEvers.
Here. Let's rise for the invocation. We have Pastor John Anderson with the Peace Lutheran Church. Renata, you have him online.
Pastor, we're just going to need you to unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm unmuted. There we go. And for some reason, the video won't start. Good to be with you all this evening, and so let us pray. Father God, I lift before you this night our city leaders, Mayor Widmeyer and the council members, Dan Gookin, Amy Evans, Christy Wood, Kiki
Jeff, we
Miller,
have no volume in the
Dan-
room.
Try again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can. Yes.
Okay. Father God, I lift before you this night our city leaders, Mayor Steve Widmeyer, and our city council members, Dan Gookin, Amy Evans, Christy Wood, Kiki Miller, Dan English, and Woody McEvers. You alone, O Lord, have granted these women and men the authority to serve the many and diverse peoples who call this area home. Continue to guide them, protect them, and keep them always alert to your will and ways in all that they do. Direct their steps, for their decisions have a great impact on many lives. During these difficult and uncertain times, we are reminded that your burden is easy and your way is sure. Therefore, grant them this night your wisdom and clarity. Give them every thought, consideration, and decision that they make is made by the power and presence of your Spirit. Let them not be anxious for anything, but in all things to seek to honor you, guided by your peace, which will guard their hearts and minds in Christ. Dispel all distractions and shine your light of truth, displacing all darkness. May this council meeting bring you glory this night while they serve and bless the residents of Coeur d'Alene, whom you so love. And we pray this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Woody, if you could lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We don't have any amendments to the agenda tonight, so we will move to our presentation that we have, Museum of North Idaho update, and we have Britt Thurman, the Executive Director. Welcome, Britt.
Thank you. Thank you all for inviting me to come out today. I'm going to do my best to make eye contact with everyone in the room, but if I don't make it all the way around, please don't take that personally. So share the screen here really quickly. There we go. So I am Britt Thurman. I am the new Executive Director of the Museum of North Idaho as of November 1st of last year, and excited to take over the museum when we are in the middle of such exciting changes. So the Museum of North Idaho is currently located in City Park. We've been in that location since 1979. And we have vastly outgrown that space, so we're really looking forward to the upcoming changes that we have to move into our new facility, which is just next door in the base of Tubbs Hill. So we were very fortunate to be able to save the historic J.C. White House and move it over onto a basement foundation, which will become the new house for the Museum of North Idaho. We will be able to be open year-round, which will allow us to vastly expand our exhibits, our programs, and have a much stronger presence within the Coeur d'Alene community. I have a little video here to show you. Ooh. Maybe, there we go. So this is going to be the new facility for the Museum of North Idaho. You can see coming in from the north entrance off of Centennial Trail, we've moved the historic J.C. White House. Over to the east side is our outdoor plaza, which is going to be a new addition to the space and allow us to have some outdoor space for interpretation. We'll have a dedicated parking lot that is in the rear of the facility. That's a circular lot to allow for ease for school groups or other groups who are visiting the museum to be able to easily drop off guests. We will have a rear entrance from Tubbs Hill to make it easy if we have foot traffic or if we have parking lot traffic. You see we have an elevator, which is going to be a fantastic addition for us, making this a truly accessible museum. So level 0 all the way up to the admin offices on level 3 will be fully accessible. And then restoring that beautiful wraparound porch to create the entire new campus. So this is one of my favorite slides showing what the new museum is going to look like. This pretty much takes a cross cut of the north side of the building to show what the interior is going, how it's going to be laid out. The lower level is going to be completely underground. We already have the basement foundation that the White House is on, and we're going to be continuing to excavate the east wing, which will become our new permanent exhibit gallery. That space is going to have 14-foot ceilings, so we're digging quite far down in order to get that space excavated. And it's going to be a 4,000 square foot exhibit gallery, which pretty much is the entire footprint of the museum, the admin offices, the research library. Our entire operations would be able to fit in what is going to be our new permanent exhibit gallery. So we have some really nice floor plans that we can show you. The level 1 is going to be our main level, the entrance level to the museum. So we'll have those 2 north and south entrances that will take you to the lobby, and also where our retail gift shop will be. We're also going to have gorgeous French doors that will allow access out to that outdoor space, and I can show a slide on that outdoor space in just a moment. Level 2 will be our newly expanded research library, where we'll be able to have easier access to all of our historic documents and photographs. We have about 36,000 digitized photographs in our collection, and those will all be available in our study. We'll have a computer lab where that will be easily accessed, in addition to subscriptions for Ancestry.com, other genealogical research, so any researchers coming in will be able to use that space completely free of charge. Whether you're a museum member or not, no admission required to use that space. Our third floor is going to be our admin offices and our break room. A little less exciting, but not if you work for the museum. And then level 0 is where the bulk of the activity is going to take place. You can see our exhibit hall, which is going to be our permanent exhibits. We also have a gallery, which is going to be 650 square feet. Allow us to bring in traveling exhibits from Smithsonian, other exhibit designers, and be able to have the museum bring in a lot of these really nicely produced exhibits into the Coeur d'Alene area, as well as exhibits that we produce in-house. The other space you'll notice is the archive space. It's about 1,200 square feet. We'll be able to properly care for all of our materials. It'll be temperature controlled, climate controlled, have a great fire suppression system, fire doors. It's going to be what the archives have needed for a while, so I'm personally very excited about our new archival space that we have planned. So the outdoor plaza is a nice place for us to do some interpretation outside. We'll have seating, so whether you're a visitor who's just wanting to enjoy the outdoors for a little while, a school group who needs a place to have their lunch, or if we have an exhibit or a program going on, an outdoor concert or event, or if you would like to rent that space for a private event, that will be a really nice multi-use space. Our Tubbs Hill entrance, like I said before, is going to be a nice orientation spot for these incoming school groups before they come into the museum to do their tour or before a walking tour takes place. We'll have a nice kind of central gathering space for that. So the site plan, we're finally going to be able to bring over our Big Hank cabin that has been at the North Idaho College and bring it over onto our campus, so it'll reside with the rest of the museum, and we'll be able to do some more interpretation on that building. We're also going to be using only native flora and fauna for plantings so that the museum perfectly integrates into the Tubbs Hill area, so it doesn't stand out but blends in with the seamless beauty. For our exhibits, we're going to be centering everything around the theme of water. So the series of rivers, lakes, and aquifer, which are what brought the industry here, which are what caused people to settle here from the original Coeur d'Alene tribe to the traders to the settlers to what we are today. Our exhibits are going to be very interactive and inclusive. So no matter what your background is, no matter what your ability is, you'll be able to have a really great takeaway at the museum. So inclusion is one thing that we're really trying to build in through every aspect of the museum. Our Lake Coeur d'Alene experience is going to be a fun exhibit where you can interact with it with a smartphone or tablet. But if you do not have a smartphone or tablet or aren't as tech savvy, you'll be able to still engage with the museum as it is. We'll have a really nice augmented reality canoe ride, which will make you feel like you are sitting on the back of a canoe as you hear stories from the Coeur d'Alene tribe origin. Our Rathdrum Aquifer, so we can learn about its significance and impact on this community. And the steamboat history, where you can turn the wheel of a steamboat, a reproduction, not an artifact. We tend to keep those away from fingers of our guests. But you'll be able to turn that wheel to engage with the exhibit to learn a little bit more about the history of steamboats. And then probably my favorite are our immersive experiences. So recreating a fire lookout and a mine shaft, so that you're not just looking at exhibits on display, but you're immersing yourselves in it. You feel like you're actually there, so you can have that more personal, deeper takeaway. Our timeline for this, we've broken construction down into 2 different phases. We're just about to start phase 1, which is the site development, digging out that shell for the exhibit gallery, using all of that dirt to backfill the backspace so we can create that parking lot, and doing all of the refurbishments for inside the White House. The next phase of development is going to allow us to do all of the furnishings in the basement level, as well as bring in all of our exhibits, which will be designed by a professional exhibit company. So with all of those going along according to schedule, we have an anticipated opening date of spring 2023. And with that, we'll be able to be open year-round and have the museum be the nice community focal point that it should be. And I would also like to invite everyone to come out to the museum this season. We are going to be doing our feature exhibit on Hollywood of the North. It opens on April 1st and goes until October 30th. Should be a lot of fun. We're bringing in some of the components that we're going to be using in our new exhibit design into this, so we hope to see you all there. And if you have any questions or would like to reach out, you can contact me at the museum by phone, by email, or stop down. I'm happy to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Britt. Britt, where will the year 2021 feature exhibition be?
So that is still going to be at our current location at 115 Northwest Boulevard.
So it'll be your existing building?
It is, yes. We'll be there doing all of our operations for the next 2 years.
Okay. Council questions for Britt? Woody?
I have a question. How are we doing on fundraising? Okay.
We're doing great on fundraising. We've been able to meet all of our targets so far, which is fantastic considering we just came from a pandemic. So we do have a long road ahead of us still. We have another about $4 million that we need to raise to complete the project. But we've been doing great so far, so we're excited to continue to meet those goals.
It's great to see.
Yes.
Good job.
And Britt, you do have a large grant opportunity that's coming up.
Yes, so the National Endowment for the Humanities has a matching grant that is due this May. It's a $500,000 grant, but it is a matching grant, like I said, so we have to have 3 times the amount of funds that we're requesting. So we have to have $1.5 million that's either in the bank or pledged in order to apply for that $500,000 grant. So it's a nice way to maximize the donations that are coming in.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll move on to public comment. Anyone that would be willing to give or would like to give public comment and would have 3 minutes to do so and address the council on city matters, city business. David, come on up.
Good evening. David Lyons. In the last item on tonight's agenda, Section 3 of the Council Bill changes R34 to expand the present residential density loophole to include increased height from 45 to 63 feet. I ask you to reject that Section 3. The emails I've sent out lay out and quote sections from both the current zoning code and the original 1982 ordinance and make absolutely clear that R34 is, and since 1982 has been, a standalone zoning district with its own particulars, separate sections on lot size, yard size, height, and so on, and that the special use permit option available to owners of R17, C17, C17L is, and since 1982 has been, only for a density increase to 34. The main R34 section says, quote, R34 is intended as a high-density residential district, comma, permitting 34 units per gross acre that the city has the option of granting through the special use permit procedure, comma, to any property zoned R17, C17, C17L, or LM. The 1982 ordinance said the exact same thing. At any time from 1982 to today, the city could have created an R34 zoning district, or any property owner could have requested a zone change to R34. If that had happened, that R34 zone would have allowed 63 feet height for apartment buildings. But that never happened. All the R34 projects, there have been about 30 plus apartment buildings, all of them have been done through the special use permit option. Maybe they preferred the less visible, developer-friendly planning commission to coming to you for a zone change. So what does the special use permit option grant? The language could be clearer, and you can see how someone could misread it. But it doesn't mention height, it doesn't mention a zone change or overlay, and they'd require an ordinance from you. Quote, 34 units per gross acre, unquote, immediately precedes, quote, that the city has the option of granting through the SUP. And that's all surrounded by commas. It's the 34 units per gross acre that the special use permit applies to now and since 1982. That's crystal clear when you look at the sections under R17, C17, C17L that say what uses those property owners can get by special use permit. All of those zones have 3 sections on uses: principal uses, accessory uses, and then uses by special use permit. The R17 section on uses by special use permit, quote, permitted uses by special use permit in an R17 district shall be as follows, lists a number of things, then, quote, residential density of the R34 district as specified, unquote. The 1982 ordinance said the exact same thing. The C17 section on uses by special use permit. Permitted uses by special use permit in a C17 district shall be as follows. Residential density of the R34 district as specified. C17L, you get the pattern. Exact same thing. Residential density of the R34 district as specified. Residential density increase to 34. That's all the special use permit ever allowed. At some point, the city got the mistaken idea that the special use permit option included a height increase. That mistake got perpetuated in staff reports, but the mistake didn't matter because height wasn't an issue until recently. Until very recently, I think 16 or 17, every R34 project was only 2 or 3 or 3.5 stories, well within the 45 feet height that the C17, R17, C17L already allowed them for apartment buildings. Only in the last few years, with all this growth and density and land costs, developers want height. And so this mistake came to light. So Section 3 of the council bill makes a substantial change in R34 by expanding the present density loophole to include increased height. That would be bad, and I ask that you reject that Section 3.
Thank you, David. Anyone else wishing to give public comments tonight? Anyone online, Renata?
I have some folks online, but I do not see any hand waving. Anybody online?
All right, we will move to council announcements. Any member of the council have an announcement? Kiki?
I have a couple, actually. I told you a second ago. From the library, just a couple of things. The staff created a really great PowerPoint, and they're going to look and see why didn't I present that, but I think it's more appropriate that when it's their turn to present to committees, that they share that PowerPoint and data. But they're opening the 15th of March. Everyone's excited, I think, to get back there. Their curbside services are going to remain. They checked out over 12,000 items in January. And one thing I wanted to mention is they've recently joined an organization called the Idaho Digital Book Alliance, which is a statewide resource sharing initiative that'll provide additional resources for ebooks that are especially beneficial to children and young adults, and it can be shared with the school districts. So I love that there's a collaborative effort. They get more bang for the buck trying to get involved with those collaborations. The other thing I wanted to share is that for the past, I've been working on another project, and for the past several years, our regional municipality planners have worked together regularly. And this last year, conversations regarding the effect of COVID-19 has had on the housing market and the escalated growth projections have presented a need for more in-depth and more frequent communications. So I spoke with the mayor, the city administrator, and our planning director to see if we could request the regional planning directors discuss the formation of a housing and growth concerns coalition or task force. That would include a citizens group, representatives, business organizations, related leadership groups, and others that they saw fit. This group could address topics the public, staff, and elected officials are interested in and share that information. And for example, I understand that tonight the Post Falls City Attorney is sharing information on moratoriums with their council. So by these planners collaborating, we may be able to get more information quickly from some of the best professionals and legal minds we have to address some of these issues we're being faced with rapidly. So the other thing is they have all decided to move forward with that. Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, Rathdrum, Hayden, and the county are participating. They're planning on discussing topics that would prioritize issues that each municipality is facing and what immediate steps could be taken considered to address these changes. And the goal would be to bring recommendations back to their elected officials as soon as possible. So that's what I know about that, and as this progresses, I'd be happy to share more information.
All right. Thank you, Kiki. Anyone else have announcement for tonight? Okay, I have a couple of appointments. Mike Ward to the Planning Commission and Tom Musina to the Design Review Commission.
So moved.
Second?
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Dan?
Mr. Mayor, I'll be opposing these. This has nothing to do with these men's character or their dedication to the city. I am not happy with the direction of the Planning Commission, so I will not be supporting a reappointment to that commission. Mr. Messina has been on the Design Review Commission for 20 years, and I think that's a bit long. Sometimes I think we look at the composition of our city committees, and someone could think that there's the same 60 people live in this city, and that's it.
Any other discussion on that?
So
Kiki?
just maybe a couple questions. So were there other, Dan, did you, or Mr. Mayor, were there other people who had applied for these positions? And
I had not seen any other names come forward, no.
okay. And so I looked at this too, and I want to make sure that I'm not missing something about your comment, because we had chatted about that, Dan, before. And Design Review Commission does require by their appointment from my understanding, certain skill sets by position. And Hillary, if I'm off base here, but they have to have a planning commission member. They have to have a member who's licensed in building or site design. They have to have a realtor or developer and some others. And so Messina has been the only member who was on the planning commission who was willing to be on that board and serve in that capacity, and has dedicated a long time. I just haven't, I guess I'm looking at the skill set, the experience, and where he's at, and Dan, I'm just wondering if there's some, I've understood him to be pretty conscientious about personal property rights, community input, code compliance, so I'm just trying to figure out what the objection is, unless it's just, he's really experienced, and he's done a great job, but he's been there too long.
Yeah,
That's,
I mean, it's just, if you look at the membership in our committees from 10 years ago, you'll see a lot of overlap. And that also encourages people not to apply because they realize we just keep reappointing. And as long as we keep reappointing, what's the point in applying? And I know Mr. Lyons here applied to be on a couple of committees. It's just, this is the MO. Council seems to be okay with it. I'm not. I would like to see more diversity on our committees.
okay. And so you've approved these while you've been on quite a number of times, so this is kind of, is there some activity or some staff direction that you want to see happen rather than just kind of, I guess I'm feeling like these are pretty dedicated individuals, and maybe they're tired too, and they want to step down. But I'd like to know, do you have ideas in just this
Occasionally
topic
I
of
get all
discussion?
fired up and then I say we need to have more people on our committees, and then for a while the city will make announcements during the meetings and then we forget. And it just seems to be the same people, which to me leads to vitrification. Regardless of the talent or skill of the individual, I believe this city is composed of a vast number of individuals who bring a variety of experiences. Well, we seem to not like that.
I would say, Dan, that it's not that we don't like that. I think that the message has been that we are very open to looking at all members of the,
And I disagree.
well, yeah, we're just going to disagree on that. So any other discussion?
Well, I'd just like to see if there was something that, Dan, you had in mind. I'd love to see some positive action brought forward, rather than, just kind of publicly say nobody's applying.
All I
If
know
there's
is that
some
I got a
staff-
call about this from a citizen a couple of weeks ago who applied to be on a committee and did not receive any feedback from the city, no letter, no acknowledgement that they've even received the application. And then they found out that they missed that slot. It was appointed by someone else. So what's the enthusiasm for that person to reapply?
Dan, if you have that name, I'd be happy to follow up with them.
I'll get it to you because
Yeah.
it was an email that was sent to me.
Yeah, I'd be happy to follow up.
Sure.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right, any other comments on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion carried. Consent calendar, Woody?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for approval of the consent calendar as presented, including Resolution 21012.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any discussion, further discussion? Roll call, please, Renata.
Hood, Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
I'm good.
English.
Yes.
Motion carried. We'll move on to other business. Our first piece of other business is an update on our alcohol enforcement issues. We had a presentation last night, and Chief White was going to come back with some more information. Welcome, Chief.
Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Give me just 1 minute to bring up our presentation here, if you don't mind. Excellent. Well, I wanted to begin tonight by providing just a quick update to you all since our last council meeting. As you may have heard, we've had four of our downtown bars that offered to temporarily close early. This is expected to end this weekend. The impact of this had a significant difference in the amount of criminal activity that we saw in the downtown area. This last Friday, for instance, it was about 50% of what it was in previous weekends. Saturday was a bit busier. We had a bunch of people from Spokane, apparently quite a few from Moses Lake, but it was still not as rowdy as it was previously. We understand this is pretty much a short-term solution that the bars offered, and it was fantastic working with them through this process. But we largely expect some of the problems we were seeing previously to return once business goes back to normal, which is expected to happen this weekend. Since my last report 2 weeks ago, we've taken an additional 11 over-service reports, including one person who gave a breath sample of .395 immediately after leaving a bar. Just to be clear, anything over .350 usually represents potentially fatal alcohol poisoning and usually results in a trip to the emergency room. This person blew a .395. We saw significantly fewer fights, but we still had over a dozen DUIs that had just left the downtown area. And since the majority of our officers were still downtown handling some of the issues, we still had some calls that went delayed in our response time. Some of the things that we've done in the past they include having a meeting with the bar owners annually, which we are looking to do again very soon. We typically do this in the spring or early summer. We've also been encouraging training for servers, security, and bartenders. Some of the bars already require their staff to take online training, and the police department will also continue taking enforcement action when practicable. The city clerk's office is recommending strict enforcement of the outdoor seating permits with regards to alcohol violations. And as a reminder, this program allows the bars to encroach on city property to increase their occupancy during the summer months. The police department also recommends continuing to staff officers on overtime to keep the peace downtown, but I must tell you that this is taking a significant toll on our members and on our budget. We'd like to resume regular traffic duties and our daytime patrol duties. Just a reminder, the update that I gave you 2 weeks ago, we'd shifted patrol schedules to later in the day, and our entire traffic team has been working weekend nights, which left no regular traffic enforcement in the mornings and during the early daytime. We're recommending that we move back to normal, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands that this could have an impact on our ability to affect some of the issues that we see later in the evenings on the Fridays and Saturdays downtown, because we would see a reduction in staffing down there. Based on the direction from council from last meeting, we all gave some thought to the issue and came up with a few possibilities. I hope to make it clear that none of these all these were going to require extra work. We were just hoping to gain some direction from council as to how you would like us to proceed. So really we weren't spinning our wheels, maybe drafting an ordinance that would ultimately not be something that council wanted or something of that nature. So these were just some ideas that we're throwing out there to hopefully get some guidance from you all as to how you'd like to see us proceed. Altering our liquor license ordinance, to allow for a suspension of licenses outside of the ABC Idaho State Police process is something that we've considered. Our current ordinance does not allow for local suspension of liquor licenses, only revocation. So altering this ordinance is one possibility that council can consider. There's a couple different ways of going about that. Nampa has a model that I talked about last time, which is a point-based model, but as I explained last council meeting, it is very manpower intensive. They have a lieutenant that the majority of his duties now is handling this issue with the bars in Nampa, and I would suggest that they probably don't have the nightlife that we have here. Another option is a written ordinance that sets limits for suspension with an appeal process or the establishing a commission to review suspension recommendations, and we can certainly look into those things if council desires. Other options to council are the adoption of a public intoxication ordinance. Now, I need to be clear here that ordinances like this are usually written such that merely being intoxicated is not a violation. That would not be appropriate, but it's the behavior that's associated with that, that's seriously disruptive behavior or fighting or those sorts of things that is. I would encourage us to maybe take a hard look at that, but I would also tell you that this is going to require some effort from our legal department and from us to work cooperatively to come out with a ordinance, if we can find one, that isn't just a paper tiger. If we're going to put something out there, I want to make sure that it's enforceable and prosecutable and not just an ordinance that sits on paper that we can't do anything about. Another option is to adopt an ordinance prohibiting staff from drinking while at work. And I can tell you that I don't know the extent of this, not my staff, I'm sorry, bar staff and bartender staff. We're not sure really the extent of this problem, but I will tell you there's been several people that we've arrested for DUI immediately upon leaving work as a bartender. There's also been other instances of people drinking at work, and there's no such ordinance that exists currently or prohibition from drinking. And I would argue that it's probably hard to tell who's impaired if you're impaired also. One of the things we heard council mention previously was temporarily restricting the hours of liquor, beer, and wine sales. However, this would obviously be a temporary fix for whatever duration the council puts on the matter. but it might give us a bit of a temporary reprieve until summer hits, as we've seen over the last couple weeks. And of course, we're aware of the fact that you may have some other options you'd like us to explore, such as maybe putting some cameras downtown or some additional lighting in some of the alleys, like behind the Iron Horse or wherever, where historically we see a number of fights and things of that nature. But those things would require some additional research to determine the costs associated with them and the feasibility of doing those things. And we also realize that not taking any action and keeping things status quo is something that might ultimately be the direction of council. So at this point, I'm really just looking for guidance from this board. How would you like to see us proceed?
All right, council, questions for Chief and maybe some ideas on direction? Woody?
A couple questions, Chief. So we don't have a public intoxication ordinance?
No, sir, we really can't do such a thing. Merely being intoxicated is problematic. We can't arrest someone just for being drunk or for being under the influence of drugs unless there's an underlying behavior associated with that, such as operating a motor vehicle or fighting or running out in the middle of traffic or something of that. But merely being intoxicated, we cannot prohibit that.
Intoxicated in the street.
Open containers in a car, if they're going out back and drinking, is that, do we have to have? Do we have
Yes,
a
that
rule?
ordinance exists, and we do write tickets for that on a semi-regular basis downtown.
So it's tickets, not taking them to jail. Difference, right?
We kind of take that on a case-by-case basis. If someone has previously been causing a problem and they have an open container, we might consider taking someone to jail for that, but typically it results in a citation. Remember, the process of taking someone from downtown all the way to the public safety building and booking them into jail and then returning to downtown is a very lengthy process. I mean, it's a half-an-hour trip, round trip, without adding in the booking process, and based on how busy it is and whatever. We're basically taking an officer from his responsibilities downtown for one minor misdemeanor for an hour or more typically.
One other thing, so I've heard this term called a sweep with mobile booking. These are terms that I've been hearing, and I'm going, I'm not quite sure, but it was kind of like the idea, I think, of gathering up all the troublemakers, put them on a bus, let them sit there handcuffed while you gather up the people and then take them away.
Well, it's not as simple as that. We can't kidnap people. But we have used mobile booking on a pretty regular basis. For instance, on July 4th, we'll team up with the Sheriff's Department, and they will have a mobile booking area, maybe at the courthouse or something like that, because of the number of people that we are arresting and the time problem that I talked about just previously about taking people all the way down to the public safety building. But I would tell you doing that remotely every weekend would be a problem for not only us, but also the Sheriff's Department in terms of where to do it and the manpower associated with that.
I just thought I might have set the bar, kind of, don't go down there. They grab you and take you away. You follow that kind of thing? The same guys won't keep coming back?
Well, we can't just wholesale grab people and take them to
I didn't mean it
tank
that
or
way,
something.
Chief.
We can't
I get
do
it.
that.
All right, so this is way out of my league. I'm glad you're working on it. I watch too many movies, I think.
Amy?
I have a question in regards to the budget. You mentioned the budget impact of having the officers down on Friday and Saturday night. Did we see any savings from the lack of events this summer due to COVID? And some of the savings that we may have been staffed up for those events, let's say Ironman or 4th of July, where the crowds were less? I'm just using those as examples. Coeur d'Alene.
Sure.
Did we have savings there that are now taking care of some of this?
We did use significantly less overtime this last summer for special events than we had in years past, but I don't know the amount that we saved in that regard. I haven't done that analysis yet. Mr. Thompson, are you prepared?
Well, the other challenge with that would be the fact that we rolled over to a new calendar year, so we didn't move those savings forward, but yes, they would have hit the general funds fund balance for any savings that weren't spent. Good point.
Chief, and I would imagine that your budget for last year, when you did have, if you did have some savings for 4th of July or Coeur d'Alene, there were probably a lot of COVID issues too, where you had to, someone was exposed, so they had to isolate, and you had to fill all of those, so I'm sure that probably all balanced out.
Well, our biggest expense is usually filling in for people who are sick or something like that on patrol, and last year was no exception, especially when we had people out for an extended period of time because of COVID and other reasons like that. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Christie?
Thank you. Chief, a couple of things. You've talked about the time it takes when someone's arrested drive all the way out to the jail, go through the booking process. It is at least 30 minutes on a good day, if you're not waiting in line for your booking. So that's only part of the issue, isn't it? I mean, we talk about trying to actually respond down here from where you're located, up in the northwest area of the city. So the time of getting downtown to an emergency response, I know that that's significant as well. And officers can't just camp downtown all shift, because they have the rest of the city to deal with. So I'm getting to my question. We know this council's talked about a downtown facility for law enforcement for quite some time. Can you talk to the need of how that might help with some of the response to some of these issues?
Well, two things. You're right on in both respects to how you painted the problem. Over the past several months, during Friday and Saturday night from about 10 p.m. to about 3 a.m., pretty much our entire sworn staff is downtown. So we haven't had much of a delayed response downtown. Our delay has been going everywhere else in the city when calls happen. But they're down here because this is where the problems are immediately. And then when they do go up north or someplace else to handle a domestic violence call or something of that nature, then you're right, there is a delayed response getting back here, which, I mean, it kind of just compounds itself. So it does help having people that are dedicated just to this function, just to the downtown issue. Having a station downtown, though, does significantly help with a number of things, mostly logistics. So if we need to get an evidence bag, we need to get a citation, we need to, I mean, something as simple as going to the bathroom. The officers aren't driving, 20 minutes to the station, 20 minutes back or thereabout. Instead, they can go 2 blocks down and they're back very, very quickly. Having a station also significantly helps us in the downtown area, significantly helps us during the summer months. As you recall, we Station 2 went away about a little over a year and a half ago, and we came to council to try to get something in the parking garage, but the cost associated with that was far too great. The cost per square foot for that building was astronomical, so we've been trying to find an alternative since.
So the reason I bring that up is just really for council's discussion, that we cannot let that go. Hopefully we could find something even to address this summer, sooner the better. I worked out of that building over there. We had a couple of portable holding cells. That might be something, if we had a place that would work for Station 2, that could be considered as well. But I also had a question about the Napa ordinance. You talked that it would be intensive. I assume that's with the paperwork challenge, following up, going back and forth and doing some enforcement. So you'd probably need a body to just do that, added to your staff.
We don't have anybody to put to it now. We're in the middle of a budget year. It's basically, they would be echoing everything that a full-time Idaho State Police alcohol beverage control detective in this region does currently, only for the city's purposes, not necessarily for the Idaho State Police purposes. So in some regards, it's a duplication of effort. However, there might be an opportunity for the city to move a bit swifter than the state might in some regards.
Well, some of the other options that you've talked about, I think that public intoxication ordinance is something we should take a strong look at. That's something we could address. And I like the way that you described it. It's not meant for just anyone that's had a little too much to drink. It's really based on your actions.
And that's clearly going to require a bunch of research and whatnot from our legal unit to determine, like I said, what would be appropriate and what isn't. I mean, like I said earlier, we can't just say that being merely intoxicated is against the law. There has to be behavior associated with it. We can certainly explore that option.
Yeah. And then the bar staff not drinking, that's just a common sense to me too. I mean, I think bartenders tend to socialize. That's just who they are. They listen to everybody's trouble, maybe have a drink with them. I understand how appealing that could be, but I think you're right. You can't judge someone's intoxication level if you're intoxicated yourself. So that seems like an easy fix. The curfew, I think, is something that probably isn't a long-term fix. I mean, if we tried to say the bars will all close from 11 or 12 or whatever, till the foreseeable future. That's really not a long-term fix. For me, I like to look 3 to 5 years down the road about, we're responsible for the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens and our visitors. What do we do long-term? That's why I'm really interested in that Napa ordinance. We're going to address this going into the foreseeable future, not just try to address it right now. So I'm really interested in taking a closer look at that. And then, of course, cameras and additional lighting, I would hope we would take a strong look at that as well.
That frankly would be a huge benefit, not just for this issue, but for some of the other things that we have happen downtown outside of these hours. But once again, the placement of the cameras and what they record and what they don't record and the dynamics of that occurring would certainly take quite a bit of research and obviously a financial hard look also.
Yeah. Thank you.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Chief, here are the recommended items for priority. The first one is strict enforcement of all alcohol violations. Why are they not being enforced strictly right now?
Well, there's two problems with that. We typically do. Here's the way it typically goes. We'll give someone a warning to try to curb some of the behavior unless it's so egregious right on its face that it immediately warrants action. So typically we'll warn somebody first, and then if it continues, then we would give someone a citation. We take enforcement action, especially over the last couple months, as strongly as we can, given the manpower and the other restrictions of code and things like that that we experience.
And
what I'm saying is the first time, so for instance, we get someone who's drunken in the middle of the street. Typically, we'll stop and warn them and say, hey, because they're not impeding traffic right then, so maybe at that moment they wouldn't get a ticket, and we'll yell at them and say, get out of the street, and have a little chat with them and see if they need a taxi or something else to help get them home, or maybe their friends can help them. But if we see them in the middle of the street a second time, and especially if it's stopping traffic or otherwise impeding them, then they will usually earn themselves a citation for that.
How do you stop someone from blowing a 395?
Well, you don't serve them as much.
That's what could we do about that?
I don't know if law enforcement can really prevent that. That's largely on the bartenders and the wait staff and the security staff to,
But it's
I
illegal.
think, be very observant and see what's going on in their establishments. We can't put a cop in every bar, nor would I would suggest something like that. So I think that's largely on the business owners.
Have you thought about taking your mobile command center and parking that in the Iron Horse parking lot?
Well, we could do something similar. We probably couldn't put it in their parking lot, but we can put it on a city space, a city-owned space, and we have considered that. I think we'll probably be doing that right around St. Patty's Day. That weekend is something we're considering. We've done it previously for DUI enforcement weekends. I don't remember if it was prior to COVID or at the end of last summer, but we'll do it a couple times during the summer. The difficulty is, where do you place it so it has the biggest effect? And usually it's right around Independence Point, so someplace off of Northwest coming into town or off 3rd coming into town. 3rd's difficult because of the size of the street, and putting a fifth wheel on a hard incline is kind of difficult. So finding a good place to put that off of 3rd is problematic. We could do it on Sherman, and we've considered that. Typically, though, it ends up, I think we might have had it off of 4th once or twice, a little bit north, and then on Independence Point parking lot once or twice last weekend. But once again, we have to have somebody in it, and I'd rather have our people largely walking the streets rather than sitting in the command post waiting for the drunks to come in.
Well, I was just thinking, it has a camera on it, it has lights.
It does.
And the camera is infrared, so you don't need lights to shoot.
I don't think that camera's infrared. I don't think we have that.
Well, we'll get you one.
That'd be great.
Thanks.
Chief, if we could do one or two things right now to help you enforce the law down there, because, I truly believe it with all of the things that have gone on between Washington, and we like our Washington visitors. We don't like our Washington visitors that break the law. Right. And so I think that them being closed up has caused more bodies to come to downtown to drink, and more bodies mean more problems. You usually beef up your patrol when school ends. That's when your SROs get reassigned. So that's a June timeframe, and we're sitting here in March, right? So we got 3 months to get to there. Washington's probably going to open up a little bit. That may help us. But what are a couple things that we can do to help you enforce the law?
I think well, there's some things that are up there that may not have as big of an impact as others. For instance, the ordinance prohibiting bar employees from drinking at work. I would tell you that over the last couple of months, most of the bar employees are probably too busy to drink at work, just because of the number of people that have been coming through here. I'm not going to say it's not happening, but the overall impact of an ordinance such as that would probably not be as great as some others. And talking with our legal department, some type of ordinance to impact people's behavior that's associated with some of the things downtown that doesn't. Here's the problem we have with our current disturbing the peace ordinance. It requires a victim to go to court. And finding a victim at 2 o'clock in the morning who wants to prosecute for the other people who are basically yelling at each other, about to fight but haven't started fighting yet, but are causing a massive disturbance to the point where there's 20 or 30 people outside watching this soon-to-be fight encounter, is problematic for us. But there's no way currently to charge anything because a fight hasn't happened yet, and it requires a victim. And finding a victim at 1:30 in the morning who wants to go to court and take a day off work later on to go and testify about something that they, just witnessed after stepping out of bar X is difficult. There are some other ordinances across the state that have addressed the issue with some success, is my understanding. I know Boise has a type of, it's not a public intoxication, but it's more of a disturbing the peace while intoxicated type ordinance that would be something that I would really like to examine a bit further. I don't know if we'll come to a fantastic solution there, but that tool would help our officers, I think, during some of these nights.
So directing our legal staff to come up, the public intoxication ordinance, but maybe a little beefier than that.
It would have to be more of a disturbing the peace, disorderly conduct type ordinance. You couldn't really necessarily tie it strictly or only to the drinking, but it's the behavior associated with it. And then obviously we'd have to talk with the prosecutors to determine how to best to prosecute those things. And do you still have to have a victim, or can the police be the victim in those cases? There are some places where that has worked successfully, but up here it's been very problematic for us. So we have to work through those issues.
Mayor Woodmar, I might add to that, and haven't visited with the chief much about this, but talked to Wes Somerton, our chief prosecutor, and I think exploring the limits of the disorderly conduct is one way to go. We talked a little bit about maybe, because the chief is right, typically in most situations you need a victim and it can't be the officer. However, working with the bar owners, the bouncer, the security in the bar, could be the victim. Anybody can be it. He's right. You have to be willing to be the complaining person, but a bar owner, a bar security person could be that. So I think that's something we can work with PD to expand the enforceable limits or parameters of our current disorderly conduct, because that's really what we're after, is the disorderly conduct or the disruptive, abusive behavior. There is a state law that seems to prohibit cities from passing a law that prohibits you from being intoxicated on the sidewalk, for example. Chief's right. If you go out in the street or you're in a car or something like that, you can certainly be charged. But just being drunk, there is a law that says we probably can't pass an ordinance prohibiting that. So
That's where the disorderly comes in, right?
yeah, disorderly or a threat to yourself or others, as in the language typically. So proving that.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay. Dan, go ahead.
Just a couple of responses. I think that, public intoxication, but like I say, that's you're gonna have to craft something, because you're getting into that kind of subjective decision making. But they do that. It could be a tool, and especially in the cases where it's more obvious. So I think that's something to spend some time. One thing out of, we don't have unlimited funds. On the other hand, the public safety is pretty much always has and will be at the top of our priority list. So, and frankly, it would be easier to deal with a shortage of money, because we can move that around, we can do something with that than the shortage of people, and that, I mean, that's where the real push is, even if we allocated extra position, but I mean, just getting them, so that's a tough part, but we got to do something, and and I think in the near term, I mean, for me, I would be very supportive of the, cutting back on the hours, and that's something, if we can do that, and we can do that, soon, and it wouldn't be long-term, but I mean, if we can get us maybe through the summer or up to the summer and see how it's going, but I think that's something that we really ought to take a hard look at that one.
Woody?
Just a quick, Mike, if I could. So we can't arrest somebody for public intoxication, but we're also talking about bars over serving. So how are those two different? We're blaming the bar for over serving, but when they come outside, you can't arrest them for being intoxicated. Am I hearing that right?
Right. It would be the behavior. So if they get into a fight, that's a battery or assault. If they get into a car and drive that would be driving under the influence. If they go out into the street, there is a law prohibiting being in the public roadway. But, and we've done some research. Idaho Code 39, Section 39, specifically says no person shall be incarcerated or prosecuted criminally or civilly for the violation of any law, ordinance, resolution, or rule that includes drinking, being a common drunkard, or being found in an intoxicated or addicted condition as one of the elements of the offense, giving rise to the criminal or civil penalty. What that means is the state has said we can't pass a law that saying it's illegal to be drunk in public, intoxicated in public. Now, if you're drunk and do something else, it's the something else that you can definitely prosecute.
But just not disorderly and drunk.
And Chief, where the over-serving comes, is it the bartender that gets the violation for over-serving? So if someone goes in, this person that you said that came out was a .39. They come out of a bar, I guess you would have to prove that maybe the person was .39 when they went in. So that's what's really difficult. You don't know that they were actually served there. So that's problematic when you're trying to cite someone for over-serving someone.
There's a threshold we have to meet, and typically, unless we know that a specific server had overserved a specific person, and we can directly tie those two, then we don't issue any sort of a citation to the individual server. Instead, the civil process begins for the bar as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the things that you had asked about our recommendations, I would tell you, and it's not going to be a quick fix or an easy fix, but at some point, exploring a camera system down there and along with some signage to, kind of deter some of the behavior that we see might be something we take a look at some point also.
I wonder, Troy, you've done some work on some street lighting down there. Could we beef up the street lighting that we have in certain areas down there to improve the lighting, both on, if you're talking about that there's issues on Lakeside, do we beef up the street lighting there along Sherman? Is that something that we could explore?
Yes, we can, sir, as well as looking at the alleys with our partners from Avista down there. Yep.
Christie.
Thank you. Well, we know going forward that this problem's going to increase as soon as some of our ability to get back out and do events, we'll be dealing with some more of these issues. So that's why I like to look long-term about what are we going to do now so that we aren't a city 5-10 years from now where we're really in a mess and now we're going to try and legislate our way out of it. So I want to get ahead of it. I really want us to at some point talk about Troy finding a location for the police downtown. I've already said that. But on this strict enforcement of alcohol violations, Chief, you talk about what's outlined in current policy, and maybe our city clerk could answer a few questions too. What ability do we have right now to revoke outdoor eating permits, outdoor seating for alcohol violations?
Renata, you want to hit that one?
Sure, we allow them to use the city property through an encroachment permit. And through that encroachment permit process, they agree to the rules and regulations surrounding that. And there is quite a substantial enforcement section there that gives us the authority to do temporary suspensions, long-term suspensions, and/or revocations. And then they can appeal to the city council. So if we have knowledge that there's been a substantial overservice, we can start with progressive discipline. And last year, we actually did send out one warning letter, and the bar owner was very responsive to it. Because that's a lot of real estate that they get to use, and it's a big revenue maker for them. So I think they want those areas protected.
Do we have any current warnings going out in light of what's happening in the last 2 months?
They haven't started their outdoor seating for the season yet. That starts St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
So Renata, violations for outdoor seating, that is for violations that occurred outside in that seating area, or could it be a violation that occurred inside?
It really opens it up to say any violation of city codes.
Okay.
So it can be city codes or state codes. So it's really finding that nexus of making sure that it is specific to that bar and that bartender. So the more information in the police reports, the better it is for us to follow through with any of those suspensions.
Mm-hmm. And did you just send out the seating permit applications for this season?
Yes, we did just send out the letters that it is time to come in and gave them quite a substantial reminder of what can get them into trouble and that we will work towards suspension this year.
And Mr. Mayor, one more question. You know, this coming weekend, the weather will be quite nice, which is awesome. But you talked about going back to regular staffing, or at least dispersing some of your resources to the rest of the city, which, you know, we really have an obligation to the rest of the city too. So I don't have a good answer for you on whether we should not continue to beef up your overtime. I think this weekend will probably be a mess in the downtown area if there's no curfew on, no voluntary shutdown early, and then warm weather. I don't see how we couldn't keep asking you to bring in overtime shifts. But I understand it's taken a toll.
We can continue to try to staff them. It gets more difficult every week, just, trying to find people, like I said, that want to come out in the middle of the night, in the middle of the weekend, and especially in the middle of the winter. Maybe better this upcoming weekends than it was previously when it was snowing or something like that. But we could continue to try to staff that, certainly.
Any other questions? Kiki? Oh, I'll come back to you. Oh, go ahead, Kiki. No, go ahead.
Thank you. So I had three quick questions. So the data we had talked about before that you're tracking, is it the number of calls into specific bars during this curfew versus not, to find out if it's a successful operation?
It's a number of reported incidents total. So some of those are witnessed by the officers, which are basically the same amount that we've had in previous weekends. Along with calls for service and things of that nature.
Okay, so that's going to kind of give you more guidance after this next week as to how effective a voluntary curfew might have been, or?
This last couple weekends have been significantly different than they were in previous weekends. We still had some overservice. The overservices occurred at, we had just one night, for instance. This is on February 19th. The three that occurred that night, one was at 10:40, one was 11:05, and then one was a 3:95 that occurred at 11:30. By 11:30, that individual was already at 3:95. But closing down a couple hours early did have a significant effect on the amount of fights we responded to. There were significantly fewer than there were in weeks past. I agree with Councilmember Wood, though. This is kind of a temporary solution if we were to institute some sort of a curfew. I think it might get us over a week or two, but she's right. When the weather turns for the better, we're right back where we were. So I would.
And I'm just more interested in tracking the data to say what are the facts rather. I mean, significant is hard to say, let's budget for significant. So I'm really kind of interested in that. And the other thing I'm interested in is, what have your conversations with the owners been on? What solutions? Have they provided any solutions other than, we did this curfew, but we don't want to do it anymore? Where are you at with owner dialogue and conversations on solving this problem?
So I know I spoke with 2 bar owners just last week. I had a long talk with both of them, and we suggested a couple things that they might consider passing along to their security staff and their wait staff. And I know at least 2 of them that I talked to said they also had some conversations with their staff about being more vigilant when it comes to looking at people who might be intoxicated or right on the cusp, or might be being served by one of their friends. Somebody, if a party comes in and one of the friends is the one person that keeps on going up to the bar and ordering drinks, but that person isn't necessarily the one drinking those drinks, keeping a better eye on those types of activities.
And then my third thing is that we talked about ABC is the one that really issues these over-serving, those are the citations. And ISP and you were involved in trying to be proactive in dealing with this. What are you doing to build those relationships or strengthen or support their work so that they can be more effective in doing their job to help curb these issues?
Well, we worked with them over the past couple months. As a matter of fact, our last in-service training that we just had in the month of February, all of our officers got a better idea from the alcohol beverage people exactly what they'd like to see in an over-service report, more specifics to help them build their case easier, so it's less work that they have to do on the back end. And so all of our officers were trained on the information they'd like to see. For instance, getting receipts from the person who's 395, to get the receipts to find out exactly what they were drinking and who bought the drinks and what types of drinks, and making sure that's consistent with the statements that the person is giving us, and all those types of things. They've also I think they've already done a couple, and they're planning on doing a couple more nights where they embed with us and conduct operations inside the bar to kind of be a, to firsthand look at what's going on inside the bar, because largely we're outside, where we rely on the security staff inside the bars to take care of the problems and bring them out to us. We're largely busy with everything that's happening on the streets and the sidewalks and the alleys and things like that. But ABC typically will go inside the bars and watch the over-service occur, and then sometimes follow up with citations and things of that nature.
And that's
I had a
something you can
conversation with their,
support?
I'm sorry?
That's something you can help support them or work with them, with the local agent, to make sure that, I guess when I'm looking at the first thing, that the strict enforcement of, it's kind of their job to do that. So if there are ways that you can step up quickly to help them do that enforcement, it feels like the owner would get the message.
Well, it's a group effort. ABC's been a great partner. Idaho State Police in general. They come out and work with us on a very regular basis on the weekends to conduct extra DUI enforcement, not only making traffic stops on people who might be coming into town intoxicated, so on Northwest and on 3rd, they get hit pretty hard right after about the 8 o'clock hour for a while, hitting the intoxicated Spokaneites that are coming into town, but then at the end of the night, they're hitting them also. I believe over last weekend, I think they had 2 troopers assigned, and they did at least 5 DUIs just this last weekend, and those were not included in the numbers that I had for just our folks. The alcohol and beverage people, like I said, they're planning on working with us. They have in the past and doing it again in the near future to go inside the bars.
Well, I totally agree with beefing up the drunk and disorderly ordinances so that there's some teeth in that and it doesn't overextend and overburden staff or your staff. And using things like this encroachment permit as, a leverage tool to say we need to get serious about this. I'm really concerned about what's going to happen when the warmer weather hits. And I think I don't want to infringe on those owners' rights to make a living, but we really need to get a handle on this together, working with those owners and make sure that we can keep this downtown a nice and safe place. It doesn't seem fair that a few are going to ruin it for the many if we don't get a handle on it, so.
Amy.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted just to follow up on Councilwoman Wood's comments, a mouthful right there, on the substation. Is it an option to utilize Fire Station 1 for restroom needs, quick breaks, heating up some lunch on their lunch hour, in lieu of having a downtown station, police station?
My understanding is that still the entire station is being currently utilized by fire personnel to spread out due to the COVID issue. So we have largely, with the exception of the use of that one restroom, we've pretty much lost that station.
Okay.
I was going to ask you, Chief, a question, Christine. Christy, you
Sure.
were involved in PD for a long, long time, and Chief, you've been there for quite some time now, too. What I'm wondering is that, Coeur d'Alene has increased in population, and we've increased our staffing and our resources. I wonder what the alcohol beverage control resources from the Idaho State Police is today versus where we are 10 years ago. I mean, you're bearing the burden of with your staff of all of this. Idaho State Police and alcohol beverage control bear a part of that. I'm just wondering can you remember what their staffing was 10 years ago versus what it is today?
I think it's pretty similar. I
Yeah.
feel sorry for ISP often. They don't get a lot of new positions funded through the state.
So I think that's something that we need to, I know they have budgets just like we do, but we shouldn't bear all of the burden of the increased enforcement. And maybe that's a conversation that myself and Troy can have with some folks to see, hey, we need some more personnel up here from the Idaho State and Alcohol Beverage Control.
I think they have 2 assigned to Region 1 currently, and I think when I first got here, there was only 1 detective assigned to Region 1. Don't hold me to that, but for some reason, I think there was only 1, and now there's currently 2 as of, real recently, within the last couple of months.
So maybe things they'll be a bigger part of the effort here.
They've been a great partner when they had that position filled. There was a period of time when that position was vacant due to transfers and I think a promotion or something of that nature. But now that it's been filled, they've been very good to work with.
Okay. So, Christie.
Well, just real quick, Chief, I was going to offer to do a ride-along as council to really get eyes on what you're dealing with downtown. So, and I would hope other council would enjoy that. I know that they'll be safe. But I think it'd be good for us to get out and actually see, aside from the few body cams you were able to show, which you had to greatly reduce what's really occurring because of the privacy issues. I think it'd be good for all of us before summer to go ourselves and see. And I don't want to go down there and drink to see it because I'll probably go to jail. So I would much rather do a ride-along. So maybe you could, who should I inquire with?
We'd be happy to facilitate that. Email me whenever you'd like and we can set that up. Piece of cake.
Thank you.
Dan.
Just to follow up again on the substation idea that, in the last, not that many years, how many fire stations have we added around the city? And we don't have, and we've still got 1 police station, and so I think we've got to have the facilities and tools, and it would not make sense and then you can design it right. I mean, don't take something and try to make it do, because it's got to have some holding cell capacity and built in from the get-go. So I think, that's something that we should probably rise up pretty high on our capital project list, so.
Agree.
Right, so what direction would council like to take this to help Chief White with this issue?
Woody can.
Just a couple thoughts. So, Chief, I'm trying to understand why all of a sudden this is in front of us, and yet every summer we kind of deal with it. So what's the difference? Just staffing?
Well, there's 2 big things. Historically, we've had a break during the winter. It wasn't anywhere near as busy over the winter as it has been this winter, and that's largely, in my opinion, because Spokane's been shut down. The 300,000 people that are over there, some of them want to still party at the bars on the weekends, and so they've been coming over here. And that's been a huge part of it. We see more Spokane plates now after midnight than we have in previous years in the winter, that's for sure. During the summertime, we see plates from all over, but still, most summers, we'll see a bunch from Spokane as well. And to be clear, this is some of the level of violence and the number of fights and things of that nature, I think, are still higher than we would see in most summer nights. There was a couple nights where our lieutenant, who Brady Reed, told me that it was beyond what he had seen in his 15 years working down there. But that was really just one out-of-control weekend. The other weekends were more akin to a regular summer night, which, as you point out, is still very, very busy. I think the biggest difference is we're having to staff it year-round, where usually in the summertime, we have our school resource officers we can rely on, those additional 7 bodies that can be used for a portion of that. And we also alter our staffing model for patrol in the middle of the summer because of the inclusion of those 7 officers. And on top of that, we have a number of officers who are on overtime every day in the downtown area during the daytime. So once again, we can shift resources later for the nights and the weekends. And so, anyway, all those things combined is kind of the lack of people to handle this, along with Spokane shutting down, has been our biggest issues.
Thank you.
Christie, were you ready to
I
put
would
something
ready to
together?
make a motion, yeah.
Okay.
I make a motion to direct our city attorney to work with Chief White and his staff to craft an ordinance that adopts a public intoxication model based on behavior. And I would also, in the motion, include a follow-up on the necessary equipment for cameras, lighting. And I think that's what we had mostly talked about,
So,
those two.
Christie, I think that the direction that Mike gave us is we should go to the public, the disorderly conduct.
Disorderly conduct, did I not say that?
Yeah, go the direction instead of an intoxication.
Okay, disorderly, I can amend that motion. So my motion is to move forward for city legal to work with the police department in crafting that ordinance.
On the disorderly conduct, and then to explore cameras and
Cameras and
additional
lighting.
lighting downtown.
Correct.
And then deal with the curfew issue separately? I mean.
Yeah, I wasn't
we
going
need
to
I mean,
propose
for
that.
this weekend, like we're saying, we need to cut back on the hours pronto. I mean, it seems like that's.
Well, that's not part of your motion,
That
right,
wasn't
Christie?
part of my motion. I would certainly listen to your motion and be open to that.
So Christie has a motion. Do we have a second to Christie's?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. So Renata, did you capture her motion?
I will see if I can do it justice. So, motion by Wood, seconded by McEvers, to direct legal staff to craft an ordinance that adopts a disorderly conduct code based on behavior and explore the necessary equipment and lighting.
Motion by Christie, seconded by Woody. Further discussion? Kiki?
I would just ask if you would entertain adding to the motion exploration of utilizing the encroachment permits and strengthening the support for ABC citations, or possibly tying ABC citations to the encroachment permits. I'm just looking for something a little more, with a little more teeth in it, so that the facility that is in violation is going to be taking this a lot more seriously.
So we already have those policies, though. And
Re-
so, yeah.
Renata, when you get a report of a violation of a downtown outside encroachment permit, where does that violation come from? Does that come from a PD-led violation, or?
Yeah, in this case, it certainly would be. Right now, I'm receiving all of the reports, and so at that point, we could kind of look through which ones are egregious, where are we at. Last year, I think we had some issues with people adding tables and chairs and not sticking to their allotment, and so that was the warning we had based on some complaints and code enforcement issues last year. But this year, we would certainly work hand in hand with police on reviewing those reports, and when there's egregious over-service, we can tie it directly to that bartender or whatever and start the progressive discipline. Or if
So
it's
you're
egregious
receiving the
enough, we
ABC
could just do a suspension, yeah.
So, Ra, you're receiving the ABC citations?
Not the ABC right now. Right now, I am receiving the reports from the police department on anything that's going on in the downtown area.
Code violation?
And then ABC said they would try and filter it to us when they actually implement a fine or a suspension to those organizations, because we haven't been in that loop previously. So they're going to try and keep us in that loop now.
Okay, well, if that's already occurring, then I'm okay with that. That's what I was looking for, was to have the ABC be the enforcement that they should be, and having it being followed through to where we're at.
And Renata, you will follow up now. It seems like, and Chief said there were with an additional person at Alcohol Beverage Control, that there's more action going on there. And you'll communicate with them to get any citations that they would write to you.
Right, and usually theirs is the administrative action. So they would get the letter to us denoting which bars are getting the $5,000 fines for over-service or serving minors, and which bars are actually getting the violation of a 3-day closure or 10-day closure, or whatever it merits.
And then you can take action against their encroachment permit.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the thing we have here is a tourist town. We have people who are going to go downtown and drink, and that's just the way it is, because that's what we do.
We encourage it.
Yeah, we encourage it. We want them to. I did my ride-along 4 weeks ago, and I've done other ride-alongs right when you took over. I did a lot of ride-alongs to see what was going on downtown. Mr. Mayor, I know you walk through downtown, you see what's going on too. And it's strange, it is weird, it's a different city. But the problem we're trying to fight right now is a problem created by Washington State because they locked themselves down and they shut down businesses. We can't legislate against that. So I think this is kind of just a lot of activity for nothing. The solution is Washington needs to open itself back up, and they need to stay the hell over there. And that'll help, because then we'll go back to normal, like you said, where this was a time off for you guys. So, yeah, it's a tourist town, it's gonna happen. It's happening now because they locked themselves down. We can't change that. Nothing's gonna change here other than just a lot of busy work. I will not support a disorderly conduct. I think it's ripe for abuse. I do not want to see it abused. I also believe the light issue, that's a good idea. Let's tell the DTA to do it, because that's their job. Thanks.
Any further, Christie?
I'm going to respond back to my friend Dan. Do we encourage it? Well, we have a lot of social events, but I don't think we tell people to come here and just get snockered and be jerks all night long. And I think you have to give law enforcement tools. If we really want to prevent our city from following in the footsteps of larger cities that have become out of control, law enforcement doesn't get the support from their mayor and their council. They don't get the tools, they don't get the ordinances, and so they're just constantly in this mode of trying to control an out-of-control group of people. I think we have to give them the tools, and this public disorderly thing will absolutely give them tools. I trust their discretion. I don't think they're going to they don't abuse any of their other discretion. And so I think that this is the right thing to do, move forward with giving them its proper tools.
Any further discussion?
Mayor Woodmark,
Yes.
could I throw in my 2 cents? Because I think the goals are laudable. There is already a disturbing the peace statute that is enforceable as a misdemeanor. So I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from voting for the motion, but just to be clear, we have disturbing the peace statute. I think probably what I would hope to see, and I think Chief would go along with it, is us working a little more closely to figure out how we define that disturbing the peace, the behavior that we can fit in there, so that, and work through what police see when they're doing that, and then what we can enforce when we go to court, because we got to be able to go and prove under the disturbing the peace whether we write a new one or use the existing state statute. So I think that's that was what I'd like to see with our prosecutor's office, or that's what I'd like to come back to council with, is to say we looked at it. I think we have a lot of laws on the books that could deal with this. I think police are confronted with situations that they struggle with. We struggle if we don't have everything we need to prove it and convict in court too. So I think some better coordination would what I would like to see out of this. Nothing against your motion,
Yeah.
but that's what I want to say.
Mike, I guess the issue I would have is using the current city ordinance or the state law is just as the chief said, you have to have a victim, and you're not going to get a victim at 2 a.m. And so there needs to be either a whole new ordinance or our city ordinance drastically changed to give them the tools they need.
And again, I'm not not arguing against you. I'm just saying that I don't know that we'll be able to come up with something that comes up with victims. I think we can explore the parameters of officers being victim. I think we can explore security people being willing to be victims. You know, victims is not the right word, but the complaining party.
Complaining party,
Party. So I think that's something that we can explore limits on, and certainly support this. But I think that's the problem, is you got to have a law that police can recognize the behavior and deal with it, and then when they cite, then we have to be able to go to court
Sure.
and prove it, and within the bounds of the law or constitutional.
So the
So
motion is for the two offices to work together and make that happen.
we got that.
So Mike, disorderly conduct could be vandalism too. If someone is disorderly, and we see a lot of that downtown, whether it be broken windows or kicked over planters or a variety of things, then the victim is the property owner, and they would have, let's say this happens at 2 a.m, right? The property owner is not there, they're the victim. They certainly can be a part of the process, right?
Right, and trespass, you can trespass people, but yeah, they can be part of the problem, or not part of the problem, part of the, or be the complaining party. So that's something we can work on.
Yeah.
But it's, there are various crimes that fit this behavior, and disturbing the peace is a pretty broad statute. We looked at it today, actually, and a little bit of education, I learned the word traduce. There's a word traduce. You can't traduce under that, and that means basically defame people, to lie about them, slander them. So, I mean, it's an old concept. It's been in the law for a long time, disturbing the peace, and I think maybe we just need to explore legally how broad we can make that and how we can work with PD to include them in looking at that.
And I think that's what Christie's motion is. Christie's motion is for the two, and he's the law writers and the law enforcers to get together to see if they can make that better for
Well,
people that are
or
trying to enforce
they
it.
can, if that's applicable, to make it better, but really I'm looking at a disorderly conduct ordinance. So, not really disturbing the peace ordinance, just because I don't
Okay.
think it's going to get the same results.
So, Woody,
I have to tell you a story. This is a true police story. Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, 1962, when they had the riots, right? One of the old-time police guys out at Lake City Center. Old guys tell stories. He's a policeman. He says, we rounded them up and we put them in the cells. That's when it was down on 5th Street. Standing room only in the cells. They were kids from all over, no IDs, and money in their shoes. I've never heard that, 1962. He tells me they got all rowdy because they're all standing room only in the old jail cells that were down there. And the fire department's right next door at that time. The firemen open the door and hose them down. They're making too much noise. Hoses them down, charges them $50, and lets them out. And they didn't come back. So I kind of go back to the history of thinking when people are intoxicated, you take them to jail or a holding tank, or you make them suffer a little. And then you just take some money and then leave them alone. And now we have to go to court and we have to find out who got hurt and who's responsible. It's just like, I appreciate what you try and do, Chief. It just seems like, oh my goodness, I'm so old. I've learned so much from all this old stuff. It seems like, is there a pathway to fix what we see as a problem,
Well, thank you for not making a motion that we round people up and hose them down.
Vicky?
I just have one more thing, and, Dan's right on a good piece of this. People coming over from Spokane and starting fights is not new news. I mean, anybody who's lived here for any period of time, that's something that's occurred. If Washington opens up, will that be decreased? Probably. There'll be a lot of people. Is this going to do any harm towards law enforcement's effectiveness in keeping the downtown safe for the people who are tourists who want to just come here and have cocktails? Absolutely not. it's going to give you an additional tool for those who want to ruin it for the other people. So I don't think I don't think that, we can do anything more than get some teeth into what we already have and then be as prepared as we can for summer, so.
All right, any further discussion? If not, roll call, please. Renata?
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye?
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
No.
English,
Yes,
Wood.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you, Chief. And I'm thinking that, so this is the 1st of March. Maybe you'll come back again, maybe the first week in May, to give us an update on how this is going into the season. Not necessarily bringing that ordinance, but I'm just saying an overall update, okay, where this is what we've done. We may have some more information between now and the first week in May to act on, but just to give us a general report on how we're doing.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, thank you, appreciate it, Chief, thank you. All right, so we move on to resolution number 21-013, approve an agreement with DG&S
Let's see.
Company for the installation of a manhole and storm line for the US 95 Northwest Boulevard swale project. Chris Bosley, City
see,
Engineer, welcome,
Mr.
Chris.
Mayor,
Yes,
before we move on, I guess I feel like we haven't dealt with the potential curfew, and
I don't know, to be honest with you, Dan, I don't think the council has the appetite for that, but you can test the waters if you want. I don't think the council is looking for a curfew at this time.
If it were tied to the pandemic, I'd be open to, I don't know what your motion is, though.
well, I'll take a stab that we institute a curfew for the downtown bars and have to define that. And the time to close at 12 o'clock and to begin, so there's a little bit of notice, Friday the 12th, and run through the end of April and then reviewed again. So 12 o'clock starting on the 12th, and that would give it about 6 weeks. So we'll see if there's any
Okay.
second or interest. So
So is there a second for that?
I will second it for discussion.
Okay, motion is second, further discussion. Woody?
How many bars are we putting this on? All in the city? And
no,
restaurants?
the downtown, we'd have to define what that, and I don't know if that needs to be in the motion, but I mean, basically the downtown bar, well, we can, I mean, it sounds like, well, I'll just say, okay, from 7th Street to, we're to First Street on Sherman.
So do you still second that, Christie?
And I've,
Well, I only second it for discussion
Yeah.
purposes.
I appreciate what you're trying to do, just from my perspective, is that that's a huge step. I don't know if we've studied it enough to know who's it affect, who does it do, why do you do it for some and not for others, and so it's difficult, but you're free to make a motion, and if you have a second.
yeah, and I think that, and I don't want to, beat the dead horse, whatever, 'cause we've got a whole lot of stuff, but I just feel like, if nothing else, I'd rather have it on the record that, yeah, this is something, and try to take a stab, but anyway, that's,
Okay, so Christie, so his motion was, starting on the 12th of March, to institute a curfew of 12 o'clock for alcohol for all bars, I guess, from
on
first.
Sherman from
from
7th
first
down to First.
7th. So that's his motion.
Yeah, and I did second it for discussion purposes. and if you, I'll add my discussion, I guess.
So you'll second that?
Oh, yeah, so we can have
Oh, okay.
meaningful
So, okay.
discussion.
Get to the
So
vote,
that's
yeah.
seconded, so open it up for discussion.
Well, so Dan, I think I know what you're trying to get at. We did listen to the chief of police tell us that the calls for service were reduced significantly after those hours, just by the voluntary reduction in time from our bar owners. And so clearly that has an effect. But I do also think that Washington will soon move into another phase. And so I guess I don't want to go with a 6-week curfew when they were probably very soon going to be opening up. I mean, we're in a real tough spot here because we're asking our police to just work nonstop on the weekend and bring everybody in for overtime, and it's not going to get any better, at least for the next month. But I do hesitate to set a curfew just for that specific area, when we also have bars that, up on 4th Street, you know, that have been part of the problem as well. So I just don't, for me, I don't think it's going to be something I'm going to entertain tonight.
Amy?
And Dan, I appreciate the intent behind this. Again, I totally know where you're coming from. I think from my seat tonight is I would like a little bit more information on how it would impact the other businesses. I mean, I think we'd have some unintentional consequences and maybe moving the behavior north, you know, if they're not on Sherman and they're still coming over from Spokane, where are they going to congregate and what's the impact on those businesses? I think we need to do a little bit more work behind it.
Good.
Kiki?
And Dan, I appreciate you bringing it up because it's been a community topic, so it's good that we brought it up for discussion. I don't think we're there yet. I would really hope that some of the work that the police are doing right now would encourage these owners to, if they wanted to voluntarily do that, but I don't think we're at a time where we can entertain that at this point.
All right, any further discussion? Renata, do you want a roll call or just a voice vote?
Whichever's the pleasure of the council.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the curfew issue. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Nay.
That motion does not carry. Okay, now we will go to Chris Bosley. So this is resolution number 21-013, approve an agreement with DG&S Company for the installation of a manhole and storm line for the US 95 Northwest Boulevard swale project. Chris?
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me before you tonight. Before I make my request for approval of the contract, I just want to show you where we're at on this project because it's pretty visible, and this will answer a lot of questions for the public out there. So this blue line here represents a drainage area of 215 acres that all drains to the Spokane River of stormwater, urban stormwater in this area, right next to the US 95 bridge here. Zooming in to this location by the US 95 bridge, if you're coming down 95 and want to get down to Northwest Boulevard, you take that ramp down, and in that area right there is actually where we're creating a swale to take all this stormwater and put it into the swale where it can be treated and disposed of there rather than going straight to the river. This property is actually owned by Idaho Transportation Department, and we created an agreement with them to use this space. And this line here shows our storm line that goes down to this outfall here. Well, this manhole at this location is where we want to put this pipe in to go under 95 and then into the swale area. So this is the outfall that's down there on the Spokane River. And then these are the plans that we had put together with, as a result of a study to find out how big of a swale we'd actually have to create to accommodate this 215 or so acres of urban stormwater area. And so these are actually berms right here, and then all these little circles are the dry wells. And those inject the water into the ground if it isn't treated through the grass. If the grass becomes overwhelmed, that's where it goes. And right now we have 16 of those, or 14 of them installed right now. We have these 6 left to go, and we've got 1 berm in there. This is the spot right here from Google Street View that you would see as you're driving down. And this is what it looks like, I would say today, but this is actually last week. But this is the first berm that we've built right here and some dry wells. And another nice thing that this has created for us is it gives our crews a training opportunity. We put people into equipment that they're not completely familiar with, and it gives them an opportunity to learn some skills on it without being out in the roadway or around other people, so they can just refine their skills out there. And here are a couple more photos. These are the dry wells that we put in. They're double-depth dry wells, and there they are backfilling with some gravel. So we planned for this contractor, DG&S, to install this pipe under 95, which has to be done at night, actually, and to not inhibit traffic. And we're hoping to do this mid-March, and it should only take a couple days to be done. There's also a manhole that has to be replaced because it's not deep enough to get the required coverage under 95 for the pipe. When that is done, we will be able to plug the old pipe that goes to the outfall, and most of that 215 acres, probably about 210 acres of it, would go to the swale and rather than to the Spokane River. So we went out to bid for this, and the low bid was DG&S at $106,000, and so I would ask you to approve that contract with them, and I would stand for any questions.
Questions for Chris? If there are any questions, be looking for council action.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to approve Resolution 21013, approving agreement with DG&S Company for installation manhole and storm line for US 95 Boulevard Swale Project.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion?
Just a quick comment, if I can. This is the best project to follow what we just went through with the alcohol and stuff. Thank you for having something that's going to take some bad water out of the river. I think that's awesome. And that should be enough that we should call Spokane and tell them to open, because we don't want their bad people coming. Sorry.
All right, roll call, please, Renata.
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers,
Yes.
Buchan,
Yep.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you, Chris. Move on to Council Bill number 21-1003, approval of amendments to municipal code sections 1322.2, 1323.13, and 1324.6 to reflect language required by the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality. Mike Anderson. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Just had that timing perfect. So yes, tonight I would bring a request to amend just a few of the wastewater, of the city codes as they relate to wastewater. Not sure if you're aware, but DEQ obviously permits the city to discharge wastewater into the Spokane River, and the city actually is the permitting authority for a couple of different industries. And for those, that's what these codes are going to affect. Just those industries that are permitted through the city. Those are, in our case, what they call categorical industrial users. So, like metals finishers or things like that. People who have a specific sort of wastewater that needs to be controlled. So, short summary of what we're requesting. The first change simply allows us to measure the pollutants either in mass, which is measured in total pounds that they put out per day, or concentration, which is milligrams per liter. A second one, the second change, currently, if their permit expires, the permit actually doesn't have an expiration date. It rolls over if they don't get extended. Well, we're removing that ability, so if your permit expires, it's expired. And then the third change mentions a requirement to contact the city if either you have what's termed a slug discharge. So you can imagine what that might be. It's just a slug of stuff coming down that you discharged, these permitted people discharged, that would impact the wastewater system, or if there's some change in your process that could result in a slug discharge. It's a requirement to contact the city and let us know that this is a possibility or it already happened. So just a few quick little changes. And with that, I would stand for questions that you may have on these.
Questions for Mike. Kiki?
Just one. Is this something that was triggered by an actual physical event, or was it triggered by an administrative review of the actual code?
The administrative review was the event that triggered it. In fact, all the permits have we have 2 permits, and they both have this language in them.
Okay.
It's just to make our ordinance match what the permits say.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mike? Woody?
Is there any cost to the wastewater treatment plant with these changes? Anything new that you have to do that costs more money?
No, with these changes, no. And there's a cost to, monitor and all that. We have a pre-treatment inspections and all that stuff that we deal with, but these changes won't affect that at all.
And you said this only impacts 2 businesses.
We have 2. I overestimated. On my drawing, I showed 3, but that was 50% more than we really have.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Mike, you've piqued my curiosity.
Oh, boy.
What is a slug? What could that be?
So,
Be gentle.
in our case, the pollutant that we're concerned about for both of our metals and pH. So if there was all of a sudden a slug of a very acidic pH, or very acidic discharge, something a 3 pH or something like that was going to go into the system, like I said, their permit already requires them to tell us about it. We're just requesting, because that's something obviously we'd want to know. Hey, there's 10,000 gallons of stuff coming your way.
Stuff. What do you do when that happens?
Um,
So what would
Get
be a
out of the
typical?
way.
To me, I'd close the valve. But what do
I'd
you do?
run.
Depending on the pollutant, usually, honestly, it's just more measurement. Sometimes we can do some recycling within the plant to sort of prevent it from killing off some of our biology.
That's the concern.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure.
Any further questions? If not, we'd be looking for council action.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to dispense with the rule and read Council Bill 21003 once by title only.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Roll call, please, Renata.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Aye.
English?
Yes.
Wood?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Aye.
Motion carried. Renata, if you could read the title, please.
Council Bill number 21-1003, an ordinance providing for the amendment of the following sections of the Coeur d'Alene Municipal Code: 13.20.2.2, 13.20.3.13, and 13.20.4.6, adding language required by Idaho Department of Environmental Quality, providing for the repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and providing for the publication of a summary of the ordinance, and providing for an effective date thereof.
Motion to adopt Council Bill 211003.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on that? Roll call, please, Renata.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Of course.
English?
Yes.
Wood?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you, Mike. The next thing on the agenda, approval of staff to enter into contract negotiations for CDBG agreements with North Idaho College, Tash Lake City Center, Habitat for Humanity, and CDBG CV agreements with Idaho Youth Ranch, United Way, Love Inc., and Lake City Senior Center. We have Chelsea with us tonight.
And
Amy?
Mr. Mayor, I've consulted with our city attorney, and I don't have a legal conflict, but I am employed by one of the organizations that is represented in this agenda item tonight. So therefore, I'm going to recuse myself from this agenda item.
Mr. Mayor,
Thank you.
on the board for Lake City Center, and I'm going to recuse myself also.
Oh, We won't have a quorum.
And Mr. Mayor, I also don't have a conflict as far as I can see legally, but I guess we need a quorum. I would ask the advice of our city attorney.
Well, it's great that you're announcing your connections, but unless you're actually getting money in your pocket or your family's pocket, there's no conflict. So, I guess the statute doesn't talk about recusal. You have to recuse yourself, and I know you want to appear to be separate, but so I guess I would encourage you to not recuse yourself, to identify your relationship with the organization, and then vote as you're entitled to by law.
Right. My relationship is with North Idaho College.
Christy, what's your salary as NIC trustee?
0.
Floor is yours.
Well, good evening. So I am here to present our CDBG funding recommendations for Plan Year 2020 and some for our CV funds as well. So we have 2 decision points, and the first one is, should City Council authorize staff to proceed with agreements using 2020 CDBG funds to fund NIC, TESH, Habitat for Humanity, and Lake City Center for their projects supporting economic development, public facilities improvements, affordable for sale housing, expanding the Meals on Wheels annual grant, and adding an AED device to the Lake City Center facility. And the second one is, should City Council authorize staff to proceed with agreements to fund Idaho Youth Ranch, Love Inc., and United Way for projects to provide support and services for LMI families in Coeur d'Alene with CDBG CV funds in response to COVID-19. So we're going to go over our 2020 Community Opportunity Grant funding recommendations first. And a little history on that. We receive an annual allocation from HUD, and our Community Opportunity Grant proposals, we receive proposals for those grants each year, and they are to benefit low and moderate income Coeur d'Alene residents. So based on our 2020 annual action plan, we have budgeted $206,500 for those community opportunity grants, and a maximum of 15% of our annual allocation can be used for public service projects. So our annual allocation for 2020 was $339,375. So December 23rd, 2020, the city advertised the request for proposals and our notice of funding availability, and we posted it online, on our website, on our social media, and to the newspaper, and then we also sent it out to our stakeholders, so we have 189 stakeholders on that list as well. And then we held a workshop on January 6th via Zoom for anyone who needed a little more information on the process and the grant. And then our grant cycle, where we received applications, was from December 23rd to January 22nd, 2021. And our volunteer ad hoc committee team met on February 23rd to review and rate the applications. And here's our list of members on that committee. And the projects were prioritized based on our public survey responses for the 2021 draft annual action plan and our unmet goals for our 5-year plan from 2018 to 2022. So these are our consolidated plan goals, so our 5-year goals. So the first 2 are directly related to affordable housing for sale and for rent. And then goal 3 is improving our city sidewalks to make them more accessible. 4 is continuing with our neighborhood revitalization efforts. And then 5 is expanding higher paying employment opportunities through economic development. And then the last one is offering public service program assistance to service organizations that support moderate and low income residents. So in our 5-year plan, so far we have 3 unmet goals, and the first 2 are the housing goals for sale and for rent, and then the third one is economic development. So we are in the last 2 years of their 5-year plan, so we haven't met those 3 goals yet. So our public service grants, we have the $206,500 available. We received a total of $330,000 in grant requests. And again, our public service maximum is 15% of our total annual allocation. So we have an existing annual allocation to Lake City Center for their Meals on Wheels program, and the committee voted to increase that allocation to $10,000 this year. And then we didn't receive any other public service requests, so that $10,000 is well under that 15%. So the funding requests that we received, the first one is the NIC grant, and they requested $100,000. The committee voted to give them $30,000, and that meets our unmet goal for the economic development need. So it's a micro grant for entrepreneurs, the entrepreneur program through the Venture Center, and it would cover non-labor costs like technical assistance, so that would be business planning, setting up the structure of a business, those kinds of things, legal services, childcare for parents who are entrepreneurs, so it helps them get their business off the ground or helps them expand it. And then those grants would be a maximum of $5,000 per recipient. And then the next one is TESH, and TESH requested $121,000 for the remodel of 6 restrooms and their client kitchen. So they have 4 restrooms in their main building and 2 in their annex building, and they did indicate that the more urgent need was the bathrooms rather than the kitchen. So the committee kind of voted to maybe do half of the bathrooms in the main building this year and then do the second half from the 2021 funds. So it's a total of $85,000 for all 6 restrooms to be renovated. So they're recommending $42,500 for that project. And then the Lake City Center Meals on Wheels, the committee voted to increase the amount to $10,000 from the $5,000, and then install and train through the fire department an AED device, which is automatic external defibrillator. And it's the senior center, so the people who are served by the senior center are more high at risk for cardiac arrest. And then a lot of the volunteers and people who work there are also in that older population as well. And then the last one is the Habitat for Humanity, and they asked for $120,000, and the committee voted to meet that, and that meets our goal for affordable housing, and that's for sale housing. So they are going to create 20 affordable homes for low and moderate income families, and the funds from this grant would be used for site design, design development, code analysis, schematic design, and construction documentation. So I don't know if anyone has any questions on those ones before we go into the COVID-related funds, or?
Any questions from council on those? Go ahead.
Okay, so we'll go into the CV funds. So again, we've received 2 rounds of funding from the CDBG CV funds, $199,675 in the first round, and then $247,124 in the third round of funding. And the funds can be used to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus, and they still need to prioritize our low and moderate income population. So that's a total of $446,799 in CV funds from HUD. And so far we have allocated $221,053 for projects, homeless sheltering, the Meals on Wheels, our Boys and Girls Club, food pantry, some sheltering and counseling, child care assistance, academic support, and some utility subsistence, and then some admin funds as well. So our first request is Idaho Youth Ranch for a case manager position. Their position is budgeted at $49,000, and we voted to give them 28,000. So they have found that because of COVID, their counselors are spending time being case managers and helping people find resources and different services rather than spending their time on their counseling. So they hired a case manager, and that's what this money would go towards, funding that position. And then Love Inc. is asking, they asked for $50,000 for a rental and utility assistance program, and the committee voted to award them $20,000. And that is just to supply rent and utility assistance to those affected by COVID. And they have an intake process already in place where they help people, and they have courses and other resources available as well. They are a religious-based group, but they don't discriminate or require you to be part of their church or part of their organization to receive help. And then the last one is United Way of North Idaho and their child care scholarship program. They are just looking to extend that. We already funded them $15,000 previously, and they're looking for another $52,000 to continue that on for about 6 months. So they've had a big success with that, and it assists families experiencing hardship due to COVID-19 and accessing and maintaining childcare for working parents. And their maximum award is $1,500 per family. So again, here's that list of the projects we've already funded. It totals at $221,053.
Can you go back to that slide for a second? Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just the COVID money?
Yeah, that's just the COVID money that we've funded so far.
Okay. Thank you.
And so if we fund these 3 projects, that's going to leave us $66,386 of COVID money left. So these 3 together total $100,000.
A little discrepancy there, so it says total remaining CV funds 166.
That's what we have right now. So without funding the 3 that we just talked about.
And those 3 total 100,000?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so, and they all fall under the national objective to benefit low and moderate income persons, and they meet the requirements for the CV funds to prepare, prevent, and respond to coronavirus. And so the decision points are the City Council should authorize staff to enter into contract negotiations for 2020 CDBG Community Opportunity Grants with the following organizations: NIC for Economic Development, Entrepreneurial Scholarships for $30,000, Lake City Center for their annual Meals on Wheels program expanded to $10,000, Lake City Center for the purchase and installation of an AED device for $2,500, TESH for the remodel of 2 of their restaurant rooms to ADA compliance for $42,500, and the Habitat for Humanity for their affordable for sale housing project planning for $120,000. And this second decision point, City Council should authorize staff to enter into contract negotiations for the CDBG CV funds with the following organizations: Idaho Youth Ranch for their case manager position for $28,000, Love Inc. for their rental and utility assistance program for $20,000, and United Way of North Idaho for their child care scholarship program for $52,000. And that is it. Any
All right.
questions?
Questions for Chelsea? If we don't have any questions, then we'd be looking for council action.
Mr. Mayor, I move to authorize staff to enter into contract negotiations for CDBG agreements with North Idaho College, TESH, Lake City Center, and Habitat Humanity for Plan Year 2020, and CBDG-CV agreements with Idaho Youth Ranch, United Way, Love Inc., and Lake City Center.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Just
Woody?
that's a terrific list of things that are going to be done. That's great.
I was just going to maybe comment on being on this, this committee is really quite a challenge because all these great things, and then something new comes along, the love thing this year. We don't seem to be able to do much because not a lot of money on the housing and the jobs, right? That seems to be the big pounder for us, and it was interesting because we don't see the housing thing come along, and it's not like it buys a house, it buys some design or something. And then I was thinking about the jobs. NIC is doing an entrepreneurially dooley thing. So it's weird, you get these big mounds of money they want or need, and it's the first time, and you go, well, let's give you something to get going to see if you can make it work. And it seems to work that way. I mean, I've been on this for a few years, so it keeps coming around, and you see people start tweaking it and getting better at it, and it's another world, I'll tell you. Just like sitting up here, Steve. It's another world.
Another world, yeah.
But I encourage it. It's been interesting and very humbling at times.
All right, if there's no other discussion, we'll be looking for the roll call. Renata?
Gookin,
Yeah.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers.
Abstain.
Motion carried. Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Now we'll move on to Council Bill number 21-1001, approval of amendments of Municipal Code Title 16 and 17 to make minor technical changes for consistency and clarification. Hillary?
Right, well, good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a follow-up to the items I brought before you in January, so January 19th, and staff heard the changes that council had suggested that at that time, and so brought that forward in tonight's item. So a little background, again, staff looks at our zoning code and our subdivision code kind of on a regular basis to look for any issues and inconsistencies and whatnot, and so the changes tonight are minor in nature, and they're really being made for consistency and clarification. So the first item is on the Title 16 subdivision code, and then the second item will be on the Title 17 zoning code. So first up, Title 16 subdivision code, this is really just one change. It's just related to the appeal timing, changed to reflect 15 days from the date of the Planning Commission decision. And yes, I know there's probably a question on what that means. It's calendar days. And we actually have that in the definition section of the code. So, but yes. Very good question. So that was one of the things that council had asked us to do before we had kind of those two things in there. We were trying to clarify it. When I came to you in January, one was based on the date of publication. The other one was the date of mailing. And it was 10 days. And so council had a great suggestion to, let's make it all consistent. Let's do 15 days from the date of Planning Commission decision. So in the zoning code, the items before you, most of them are minor, and you heard me talk about them before. So the first one is on the mobile home 8 zoning district, is to clarify the maximum height of a single-family residence. The next one is related to C17, which is our commercial zoning district. It's related to site performance standards, side and rear setbacks, and then also addressing stormwater to make sure that the setbacks would allow for the stormwater to be maintained on the property rather than impacting the neighbor, and then also allowing horizontal mixed-use projects to be able to use the setbacks of that use. So those are some nice, simple changes, but I think will be very beneficial. The other one is cleaning up some old language and property titles, adding designee, so really related to planning director. There was some references to the former male planning director, so just kind of neutralizing that and adding or designee related to planning director, city engineer, et cetera. The clarifying the height of accessory dwelling units over a garage, wanted to make sure that was crystal clear in the code, that if you're over a garage, you can get up to the 24 feet. Otherwise, if it's just on its own in the rear yard, it's 18 feet is the maximum height for that. The buffer yard regulations, you approved the change in January for the commercial design guidelines, and this is just making sure that it's clear there would be a landscape buffer yard requirement if it's next to a single-family residence or zoning district. So it would be both of those. And then the last two, I'll kind of cover on the next two slides, but really clarifying the appeal process and timing, and then also clarifying R34 special use permit. And do want to note, we're not making any changes to who can appeal. We kept the code as is. Council made that clear that anyone should be able to appeal the Planning Commission and other approvals. So again, the changes to the appeal timing consistent with what I just mentioned for subdivision code. So all the references are now going to be cleaned up in Title 17 so that the appeal clock would be the 15 days from the date of the Planning Commission decision. And then also just referring back to the appeals process, which is outlined in more detail in that 1709-125B that really just has some minor clarifications as well. And then on the R34, just wanted to make sure that council understands the intent of this, why staff is bringing this forward. So I did provide some additional documentation to council showing that this goes all the way back to 1982, and then there were subsequent amendments throughout the time. It was drafted at the time in 1982, and it was adopted by City Council that R34 was through the special use permit. It was never intended to be a standalone zoning district, and that's why there's that specific language in there saying that City Council, or the city has the option of granting through the special use permit, and it outlines the zoning districts where it could be applied. Those are the underlying zoning districts, and it's basically a special use permit on top of that that would expire if someone doesn't take advantage of that project. And that's why, as Mr. Lyons stated, over the years, there's been 30 apartment projects. They've all been done through the special use permit process. They were done properly. That's how it was intended to be. And that also, if you look through the designation language for R34, all the way back to 1982, the height limit was right around 63 feet tall. So if you were granted a special use permit for R34, you automatically get the increased height. So the underlying zoning was 45 feet. You get the special use permit, you automatically get the increased height. Initially, it was 62.5 feet, and then in 2007, I believe it went up to 63 feet. In fact, when it first was adopted, within 2 blocks of the downtown, it was unlimited height, and also for non-residential uses, and so that's been clarified through the code. So some of the other little minor changes before you this evening related to the R34 are clarifying the transportation plan to be KMPO's current plan for the city of Coeur d'Alene. We don't have our own standalone one, and so wanted to make that really clear what we would be looking at. And then also clarifying proximity to parks should still be important, even if it's an adult-only residential project, versus the language in there was that it didn't have to be close to a school or park. So those are the changes before you this evening. The decision point recommendation is to approve the housekeeping amendments to Title 16 and 17 of the Municipal Code. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Woody?
So let me ask you, let's go to R34.
Okay.
So every R34 has a SUP on it.
Correct.
So let me ask you, Dan brought up some stuff a couple weeks ago about if you are in a situation when you are going to do a special use permit, can the council request things? For example, a park in their situation, open space. How about affordable housing, 10 units for 10 years? Is that even in the game, or is it getting pushed out there?
So the city council would not be able to request that because the special use permit goes to planning commission for approval. So there is an option to add some conditions if it makes sense. They have to obviously meet the findings, kind of justify that the special use permit is appropriate. And there have been times when there's been a few conditions that have been applied, but you'd have to have it justifiable to say, okay, you have to have X number of units would be, deed restricted or whatever, thing you're saying. So if you're saying if council was to tell planning commission, we'd like you to do that, that would be outside of the process of how it works for approving a special use permit. Now, through kind of the comprehensive plan, if you're wanting us to look at things like that to then change the zoning code after the comprehensive plan is adopted, we could certainly look at things. What are the things the council wants us to explore related to project approvals, for example, if we're looking at affordable housing or park sites or things like that.
The other one was there was that relationship to core housing.
Right.
From what I'm learning about core housing, it's not R34.
It's not, and so I think that's a really good distinction to make, because staff has been working with the advisory committee and getting input from the community members and planning commission and city council. That's really intended to provide options for different housing types within residential areas. The R34 is really, I think, once we have core housing in place, if it gets adopted, they would kind of serve two different purposes. That the R34 could be placed more in the areas near arterials, whereas the core housing, once we determine what are the appropriate housing types in what areas, they would serve two different roles.
And one other thing, on the R34 can be appealed.
Correct.
And we've had two that I can remember, and once it appealed, it comes to here.
Correct. So that's kind of that checks and balances that's already in place. So while planning commission approves it, there's still the right to appeal it, and it comes straight to council.
Okay, and that's at 7th Street 1.
Exactly, yes.
Was a good fit for that. Okay. Thank you.
Dan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so let's start with the R30. Let's do that second. I'm concerned about the new language regarding appeals.
Okay.
And it says, the first one in section 2, the appeal shall state the file number of the item, blah, 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 including all objections to decision and alleged abuse of discretion or in what ways the decision is not supported by the evidence in the record. Is that something that the planning department would reject?
What we've done in the past is we've asked the appellants to just add some clarifying language. So we have an application form for the appeal. And so rather than just saying, I don't like it, let's provide some documentation why there was an error in judgment or why it shouldn't have been approved, it didn't meet the findings, or it doesn't comply with the comprehensive plan. So it's similar to any other appeal where we're actually asking for some information to kind of substantiate that so that we can.
But it's different because you're adding new language now. So it says here on section 15, the same language, but it also says a failure to provide such information may result in a denial of the appeal. Isn't that council's job?
Yes, that is council's job. So
That's my
probably
concern,
not
is that
exactly worded as it should be. So
if
staff would
someone-
never deny the appeal. But if we would say, you need to now correct your application to move forward through the appeal process before we can have or not schedule an appeal hearing. But that sentence.
That seems to me to be a judgment call made by you instead of us. I mean, I think if someone's going to appeal something, they just fill out the form, they can state their reason, and it can be vague. I mean, I'm okay with vague because we'll reject vague. But we're the ones who make the decision. And if I find that someone is appealing something and the planning department is saying, no, this isn't good enough, to me, that's still stifling the public.
So these are simply recommendations, so if there's certain
What do you
language.
mean these are recommendations?
Well, the items before you this evening,
You mean
Or,
you mean I can pull this out because I don't like it?
you can pull that out, you can suggest changes. If you don't like that one sentence, you could certainly strike that. I mean, this
Thank
is, again, council's
Mayor
desire.
Whitmire, I had a comment. I think this came up a few years back when somebody appealed a project. It was, I think, a bigger project, and just said, basically, we don't like it. And it puts the party that was approved in the position of they have to prepare, they have to expend money, they have to come. So your point is, yes, you still have the right to do that, but I think that's one of the reasons why, because the other side doesn't have any information to respond to, and yet they have to go through all the expense and prepare and come to a hearing before city council.
And you do have to pay to appeal, right? I mean, it's not.
Correct.
We're not doing this, letting people do this free, and then the other side has to come and do all the work. I honestly think someone doesn't like something is a valid reason to appeal. We may not accept that up here, but that should be our decision. I don't think that should be, staff should say that, and I can see some sticking points in the future with people who want to appeal things if staff is going to say, no, this appeal isn't good enough, if you see where I'm headed. Going to the R34 topic. So I'm looking at section 3, and we got a lot of email about section 3. And honestly, so what it says here is R34 district is included as a high-density residential district, it's not a zone, 34 units gross per acre, and what you're adding is and increased height. But yet, back here, in your slideshow, it said the 63-foot height maximum is automatically allowed. So if it's automatically allowed, why are we adding the increased height?
Well, as you've heard before you this evening and multiple times in the past, we have some community members that are saying that it doesn't include that. So we're adding this to make it crystal clear that the process, the special use permit process, which is the only way you can get R34 in the city, automatically allows the increased height, because that was always the intention. If you looked back at the documents I sent you going back to 1982 and all of the ordinances subsequently that amended it, they all reference 62 and a half feet tall to 63 feet tall was the height for residential. So we're making it very clear in here, and then we also say it's only allowed through special use permit and not a standalone zoning district, to make it so that we don't continue to have this argument come up over and over again.
So in the current code, we have, someone decides to do an R34, and the underlining zone, the maximum height is 43 feet. 45 feet. So if they do an R34, and it's approved by Planning Commission, they can only go to 45.
No, 63 feet.
Because the R34 SUP also allows increased height?
The R34 is only a special use permit. So it was grouped with the other zoning districts just because that was how it was put into the code. It's the only one that's done through a special use permit. It's the only one that references the underlying zoning districts.
So it automatically adds increased height?
It does.
But all the way up until now, they've automatically added
Always.
increased height?
Always.
And so we're adding this language in here just to drive that nail home?
Yes, because it seems like it still has been unclear. So we want to just make it crystal clear.
What happens if we don't add this language?
Well, it's staff's opinion that it still is 63 feet tall, and it's only through special use permit, because that's how we've been implementing it for 39 years.
The next sentence says, or the rest of the sentence says that this city has the option of granting through special use permit to any property, and that lists the zones. And then the sentence you added just repeats it. It says this designation is only allowed through a special use permit. Why does it have to be mentioned twice?
Well, again, we're just trying to make it crystal clear so that there's no confusion going forward that it's only allowed through special use permit. So if
So we're
someone
being
came in and said, I
redundant.
want a zone change to R34, we tell them no.
So redundancy adds clarity.
That's the hope.
Well, it is government. Yeah, it's just, so I have an issue with that, because it seems like if it's already allowed in the code, we don't need to make the change. If the language already says special use permit, we don't need to add a second sentence that says special use permit. It just seems redundant to me. That's one of my sticking points, Mr. Mayor, as well as the new language regarding the appeal process. You know, if people want to spend the $250 and waste time, they can do that. I mean, if someone has a project that's being challenged and it's because it's ugly or something like that, I mean, we're not going to buy that one. I mean, the only appeals I see that council has approved or has, went ahead and accepted the appeal and overturned a decision is when the public comes here and they're massively informed and they cite the reasons, A, B, C, D. I mean, that's what convinces council. If they're just to say, I don't like it or it's ugly, I've seen a lot of those go down in smoke. So I don't see any reason to change the appeal language.
And all those things can be changed through a motion and a vote.
Yeah.
Other comments, questions for Hillary?
Well, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Well, I too was trying to figure out your responses that you gave to us, Hillary, were much different than what we got in the email and the testimony from Mr. Lyons. So I was trying to figure this out. And you talking to Dan helped me understand. You're just trying to really make it clear, crystal clear. But you're not disagreeing that height is going to be something allowed by special use.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
All right. Kiki, do you have something?
I guess I'm trying to be crystal clear here. Because I'm still trying to get my head around how this was ever misinterpreted and as a new loophole. And I haven't gotten that yet. Because if it was, the planner who wrote the code had that it was 62 and a half feet tall, was the same planner that implemented that code since you got here, right?
Right.
So I guess I was trying to get my head around how that was ever misinterpreted in the first place, because I didn't see that. So I had a problem with that. And I also wanted to ask you if an R34 special use permit, which is only allowed by a special use permit, and it may have it has some purpose, it's a useful tool within the city. Is that something that you had discussed, having those come to council for approval rather than planning and zoning? Has that discussion occurred?
No, because the special use permit process, actually, that was outlined in the 1982 ordinance as well. So that's always been in place, that goes to planning commission and it stops there. If we were to add that it now goes to council for a certain one, it just kind of makes a whole other set of rules. I mean, I think if council wants to hear it, it's either, do you want it to, be a zoning district instead of a special use permit? But then there's implications to that it's permanent, it runs with the land, versus a special use permit that does expire if someone doesn't move forward with their project. So that's the difference with that. It'd be kind of unusual to have special use permit process only for the one that has 2 sets of hearings.
That makes sense. Okay, that's all I had. I was still just trying to see how that got misconstrued, so I'm not sure yet how that happened.
Christie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hillary, that just kind of opened up another question. What are other cities doing? Do they really follow just the planning commission, everything goes on R34 through the special use process, or are councils hearing these requests?
So special use permits, most jurisdictions do it where it stops at planning commission. And in fact, a lot of cities, I think even Post Falls, had it so subdivision and other things actually went to city council as well. The state statutes don't require that for most things. So the zoning districts and annexations have to come to council. The other ones stop at planning commission. So a lot of communities are actually trying to streamline it because it's a lengthy process for an applicant if they have to go through extra hearings that may not be considered necessary if, the state statutes allow it to just have a, one stop. And that's your decision with the ability to appeal.
I see. Okay, thank you.
All right,
So Hillary, can you give me examples of R34s here? I mean, it's relatively new.
There are not very many. So we have, wish I had kind of the map. I know that there's been a few that have been appealed and denied, right?
Right.
I think the mayor's project on Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive, that was one that was R34, and then the Riverstone project, Parkwood Properties, one over by the pond, that's an R34.
But there hasn't been a lot.
There's not a lot.
And
No.
it's not got a real deep history. I mean, I was
Right.
on P&Z before I came here, and that goes
Right.
back a lot of years.
Right.
And I don't,
Hillary, didn't you say there's been 30 since 1982?
And some of those terminated because they didn't move forward with the project, so,
oh, really?
Yeah.
30.
Yeah, special use permits.
at least that was the number that Mr. Lyons had cited, and I know he's done the public records request to ask for all the mapping and the applications and approvals of that, so I'll rely on that number.
All right, anything else? Christine?
Yeah, I think I would like to leave in the appeal language the same as it was, rather than what's proposed, just for that very reason that we don't want to make it a burden for people to appeal. I understand why you brought it forward, and I understand wanting, give us some specifics about what the problem is, but I think we have to be careful not to really encumber private citizens from coming forward. So that's the only thing that I'd like to see us strike. Everything else makes perfect sense.
So what
thank
that
you.
means is you'd like to make a motion.
Well, I think Dan, didn't you make?
No, he didn't make a motion.
No,
He was
you
waiting-
make the
he was waiting
motion.
for you.
You make the motion,
Okay.
Dan.
And if I may, before a motion is made, I just want to clarify in section 15, the language that should remain, if you didn't like most of it, you need it, the 15 days still should be in there. So that, under B, if you look at that, so. And you could have it maybe end with submitted to the planning director and then just not make any other changes or something.
Yeah,
If
that'd
that's
be fine.
how you'd like to have it, just so it's consistent.
Dan, is that your motion?
Yes, I will craft it, and I will do a little parliamentary maneuver here. So I am going to make a motion. Oh, dang. We have to suspend the rule and then make the motion, don't we?
That would work.
Okay, so first we're going to suspend the rule, then we're going to do the sausage. So I'll make a motion to dispense with the rule and read Council Bill 21-1001 by title only, and then we'll fix it, right?
Second.
Thank you.
Motion and second to dispense with the rule. Any discussion on that? Roll call, please.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin.
Oh, yeah.
Motion carried. So before you read the title, Renata, do we need to, because Dan's going to suggest some changes in the language, do you want those changes first before you read the title, or would you just like to read the title?
Hillary, my question is to you. Would any of these codes change, or is it just language within these codes that's going to change? Because in the title, it specifically lists out every single section of code you're amending. And it seemed to me like what Dan was interested in amending is maybe just a sentence within those code sections that's still being amended.
That is my understanding as well, so I guess we'll.
So I think
ask
the title
Councilman
would
Gookin.
still be the same.
Okay, so Renata, if you could read the title, please.
Council Bill number 21-1001, an ordinance amending the following sections of the municipal code of the city of Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai County, Idaho. 16.05.050, 16.25.050A, 17.05.330A, 17.05.455, 17.05.560C, 17.06.015, 17.06.660, 17.06.830, 17.07.320, 17.07.810, 17.07.945A, 17.08.945B, 17.08.955, 17.09.120D, 17.09.125, 17.09.215C, 17.09.235, 17.09.34A, 17.09.472, 17.09.615A, 17.09.710, 17.44.050, 17.44.090, 17.44.170, 17.44.220, and 17.44.225.
Very good.
To clarify the appeals process and to make various technical changes for consistency and clarification, providing for the repeal of conflicting ordinances, and providing for severability, and providing for the publication of a summary, and providing an effective date.
All right, and then the motion.
Yeah. So I would move to adopt Council Bill 21-1001, removing all appeal language except for the days after the decision is made.
Okay.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Oh, and then I want to make, before we do that, I want to make a motion to modify my motion, so we'll see if this goes anywhere, to remove the modifications from Section 3A, which is the increased height for R34, and to remove the duplicate language regarding special use permit. And I'll see if I get a second on that.
I can't follow you down that one, Dan.
No, that's fine. That's why I did it separately, because I
Thank
just wanted
you.
to see who else, if anyone else wanted to do that. No one does, Mr. Mayor.
And Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but on your motion, I just want to clarify, so you were
The
talking about.
first one.
Yes, the first one on the appeal language, and that's just on section 15.
It's on
Is that
all of
correct?
them. It's all
On
the
all of
appeal
them.
language. So
Okay.
you got Section 2 has appeal language. I see appeal language.
Some of the appeal ones.
Section 21.
reference that-
I see, I saw it somewhere else too. 15, that's right. 15 had the flag too.
1521?
1521.
So to clarify, the appeal language, your motion is to just have the days stated.
Yeah, it's just going to say within 15 days after the decision of the Planning Commission, and then the rest of that red text gets yanked.
And that was your second. Okay?
And the other thing about the R34 failed, so we're not voting on that.
Okay. So, further discussion on that.
I'm still not clear, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a lot of sections that reference the appeals stuff that also reference decision by planning commission. So I just want to make sure that staff
Can you
understands.
just point those out? We could go through and you could point them all out.
That might be helpful. I just want to make sure when we bring this forward to the codifiers, that we bring the right language. So,
Okay, so specifically in section 2, it would be the new text after the 15-day decision of the planning commission, then the text starting the appeal shall state the file number of the item.
So that's-
all that goes.
okay.
And then it resumes with the existing code upon receipt of the appeal. Then, the next one is in section 15. And again, same thing, section B in there. Appeal within 15 days after decision of the planning commission. The appeal may be submitted to the planning director, that's fine, and it'll be in the form of a completed appeal application, but then after the file number thing, it'll state specifically, so it's a text in red here, state specifically the basis of the appeal, including objections, da-da-da-da-da, all the way down to upon receipt of the application. And then in section 21, it would be the last two sentences that were added to the end of section 21. It is the responsibility of the appellant to provide the information, and a failure to provide the information may result in the denial.
So Dan, what you're just saying is that you want to have people that have the right to appeal. They don't have to state why, but when it comes to here, and we're talking about this red language here, it says shall be accompanied by, or it says to facilitate a full and complete review. So you're saying you say, I want to appeal this project, but they still have, when it comes to the language, it says, and the fee as referenced in the fee schedule. So they're still paying the fee. So
They gotta pay the fee.
You're not striking the fee language.
Oh, no.
You're just striking, saying that they don't have to state a reason.
They really don't, I mean, and they will, but they really don't have to. It's just, we're going to appeal it. And the understanding here, of course, is that, someone's paying money. If it's frivolous, we're going to say no. So they're wasting time. But I don't think that's the case.
So Hillary, does that clarify then it's just a citizen has the right to appeal, still has to mention the fee schedule?
Right.
It's just that they don't have to state the reason.
Yes, so we'll still reference that. And then that last sentence under section 15 that has some blue and red, is that to stay, or do you want to go back to?
Yeah, upon
what-
receipt of
okay,
a complete
so that's
application
okay.
and payment of
Okay,
fees.
Perfect, okay.
Planning director designee.
Yeah, great.
Will set a hearing before the city council.
Okay,
Yeah, because
excellent.
you're right, that's housekeeping, that's
Yeah,
fine.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Okay, so motion by Dan, seconded by Christie. Any further discussion on that? Okay, roll call, please, Renata.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin.
Yeah.
Motion carried. Thank you,
Mr.
Hillary.
Mayor, I'd like to enter into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74206F to communicate with legal counsel for a public agency to discuss the legal ramifications of and legal options for pending litigation or controversies not yet being litigated but eminently likely to be litigated.
Second.
Motion and a second to go into executive session. Any further discussion? Roll
Mayor-
call, please,
oh.
Renata. Oh,
The only thing I would say is give us a few minutes after we go into executive session to kind of set up and get the room secure. We're going to probably stay here,
Yeah.
and so make sure the audio's off and all this kind
Right.
of stuff. So let's
Yeah.
take a little bit of a break.
yeah, okay.
Cocktails?
Roll call, please, Renata.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin.
Yep.
English.
Yes.
We're in executive session, so we'll take about a 5-minute or so break.
You know, I've been